of our country. I mean, it's quite astonishing, but it is an exit poll. Let's see how it
is an
plays
exit
out.
poll, and it could be the case. We expect it won't be that Blythe Valley is an outlier. Listen, you're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. It's just gone midnight. Let me take you through these dramatic headlines so far. The first results are in, and the Conservatives have gained a seat, as we've just been mentioning, in the North East. It's Blythe Valley, but Labour held on in Newcastle Central and Houghton and Sunderland South. We were hoping to hear from one of the returned candidates there, but let me tell you, Labour's vote share has dropped more than 18% in Sunderland and Houghton. John Bercow, our special guest here tonight, telling us the early results are a catastrophe for Labour. And the exit poll for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News has predicted that the Conservative Party, and this is why we're predicting it could be a catastrophe for the Labour Party, that the Conservatives will get 368 seats on that exit poll. That would be a majority of 86. It is suggesting that for Labour, they dip below 200 seats, secure 191 seats or so. Now, that would be their lowest number of seats for many decades, since 1935, in actual fact. The Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, told us the situation does look dramatically bad. And after the exit poll, Boris Johnson thanked voters on Twitter, saying we live in the greatest democracy in the world. That from the Prime Minister. Well, John Bercow, you've made our headlines. Imagine that you're sitting right beside us. But, I mean, the serious point being if, and we've got to keep saying that, but the early results confirming that trend there. And what I was saying to Beth before we hit 12 o'clock there, Barry Gardner, John McDonnell have all been on the programme, and they're looking pretty shell-shocked.
Yes, they're obviously very deflated, to put it mildly. Everybody inserts, and quite rightly, the caveat, let's wait to see whether these early extrapolations are replicated elsewhere in the country. But if on any significant scale we see what we've seen over the last hour elsewhere in the North and in the Midlands, that spells doom for Labour. I should say, in relation to Bridget Phillipson, I mean, she's a very dedicated, conscientious and principled Member of Parliament in Houghton and Sunderland South, and very active in the House of Commons. But she
John, while you're on Sunderland and your unsurpassable knowledge of these seats, we've got Sunderland Central, I'm hearing. They all count in the same building. They're due to declare. Now, this...
Julie Elliott?
Yeah, but this could be better for the Conservatives.
Yes, it's perfectly possible that it could be. Julie Elliott is the outgoing and long-standing Member of Parliament.
But the exit poll is suggesting, because it does do seat-by-seat analysis, suggesting that it's too close to call in Sunderland Central.
Well, again, you've got the Brexit factor. I come back to this point that we touched on earlier, Dermot, that in Newcastle, of course, they voted to remain in the European Union. In Sunderland, back in 2016, there was that sharp intake of breath when the results from Sunderland were announced. There was a very heavy Leave vote, and I have to assume that there is a link between that heavy Leave vote on the one hand and the punishment of Labour members of Parliament and candidates on the other.
Well,
so
there'll be a sharp intake,
but much reduced. Well, we'll have to see what happens to
exactly, there'll be a sharp intake of breath if the Conservatives take Sunderland Central. Well, as you know, Sarah Jane Mee is in Sunderland for us and can update us. Sarah Jane. There you are.
Yeah, hi Dermot. We've just been given a 3-minute warning here. The returning officer has asked for all the Sunderland Central candidates to gather to the right of the stage. They're all in a huddle at the moment. They'll then take to the stage behind me, and the returning officer, Patrick Melia, will announce that result. It's really interesting, actually. Labour...
Sorry, Sarah Jane, Newcastle East is declaring. Let's see how it goes.
Tyne East constituency is as follows. Nicholas Hugh Brown, Labour Party, 26,049 votes. Robert Charles Patrick Gwynn, also known as Robin Gwynn, the Conservative Party, 10,586 votes. Nicholas Terry Hartley, also known as Nick Hartley, Green Party candidate, 2,195. Wendy Barbara Taylor.
OK, we'll leave there Nick Brown, long-standing Labour MP there. Back in. Vote down ever so slightly. We were concentrating on Sunderland Central. We're hearing it's too close to call. Sarah Jane Mee is there. I think we're getting a declaration.
Acting Returning Officer, hereby give notice that the total number of votes for each candidate for the Sunderland Central constituency is as follows. Tom De Silva, the Conservative Party, 15,372. Julie Elliott, Labour Party, 18,336. Rachel. Okay, thank you. Rachel Sarah Featherstone, Green Party, 1,212. Niall Dane Hodson, Liberal Democrat, 3,025. Dale Mackenzie, Independent, 484. Viral Kashakuma Parikh, 5,047. And that Julie Elliott has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency.
OK, there you've heard it for yourself. Julie Elliott is back there as the Labour MP for Sunderland Central with a much reduced majority. As you know, we're talking to Sarah Jane Mee, who's right there. And, well, back, but shaved that majority way down, the Conservatives and, indeed, the Brexit Party, Sarah Jane.
Yes, indeed. Julie Elliott's majority last time out was 9,997, reduced significantly to 2,964 here tonight. A lot of votes actually went the Lib Dems way. The last Lib Dem candidate got 1,777 votes. That's gone up to 3,000 this time round, which is interesting. But Julie Elliott hangs on to Sunderland Central. There had been a rumour that tonight could turn blue, but it remains red this evening. She's just making her acceptance speech. We're still awaiting the Washington and Sunderland West result, but we'll bring that to you as soon as we get it, Dermot.
OK, Sarah Jane, thank you very much indeed. Let's stay on that change in share in Sunderland Central. We were told it was too close to call. Well, it wasn't, but it was, by the standards of the previous majority held there by Julie Elliott, as Sarah Jane was saying. It was nearly, almost exactly, 10,000 after the last election, 9,997, well, whacked down by 13.4%. And you can see there the performance of the Brexit Party. Just to remind you, the Brexit Party did not stand in this general election against Conservative candidates where the seat had been held by the Conservatives, but did in the main stand against the Labour Party. And perhaps that explains the effect. The Conservative vote more or less unchanged there. The up 2% Lib Dems, actually up quite a lot there, doubled their vote, and the Greens up 1.2%. John Burker, we keep relating this to the exit poll, and it's pretty much in line. If you put those vote shares, the change in shares on Labour seats with smaller majorities, then they're going to be getting home in a lot of seats where we previously thought they didn't have a squeak.
Yes, I mean, this is another very bad result. I don't think it's a personal reflection on Julie Elliott. She's extremely active in the House. I've heard her speak on fire stations and court services and transport infrastructure and state pension inequality for women of a certain age and so on and so forth. She's a very dedicated and assiduous member. But we come back to this point. Is the Labour Party not able to resonate with the voters in an area that voted heavily Leave? And the answer is, clearly, it isn't resonating. And in a sense, you could argue that only the intervention of the Brexit Party caused that pro-Brexit vote to split a bit, and it probably saved Julie's bacon.
And what about Bridget Phillipson next door? Because you mentioned the Leave Remain vote. Bridget Phillipson, I mean, as you saw up close and personally in the House of Commons, was quite an avid Remainer in a very Leave-leaning seat.
Yes, she was and is an avid Remainer, and she has also been an outspoken advocate of a second referendum. And I mention this not in any sense to indict her or to be pejorative, but simply to say that she made a calculated decision that she would get that proposition out there. And I suspect it hasn't helped her locally. It's what she believes is the right way forward in relation to Brexit, but I suspect that it got a very poor response in her own constituency.
Let's get Beth's thoughts on this. I mean, we're looking at seats here, which, we imagined, because there's a whole deluge of seats to declare over the next 3 or 4 hours. These are the early declarers, which traditionally it's just been about who's first to declare. They're telling us
the story,
is pretty on the numbers, and it's going to be dire for the Labour Party.
One of my Labour sources has said to me that this looks, in terms of the early results, that the exit poll is looking pretty accurate, actually, in terms of extrapolating out the exit poll from the early results. I mean, it's interesting in this particular seat in Sunderland Central, the Brexit Party vote, if you add it to the Conservative vote, would have given them a majority. What I think will be really interesting about this, though, when we begin to chew over this in the coming days, is to the extent to which the vote was lent to the Conservatives. Gisela Stewart, a vote leave Labour MP, now not an MP anymore, did a big press conference with Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, where she said, please, if you're a Labour voter, lend Boris Johnson your vote. Lend your vote was the phrase, in order to get Brexit done. And that appears to have resonated. But the question is, can he hold together the coalition
Let's
of
talk
voters?
about the Conservatives.
It's fascinating.
Exactly, and that is the issue, isn't it, John Bercow? If this is kind of a referendum through the prism of a general election, I mean, there's been a single answer, a single slogan, certainly more or less, from the Conservatives about getting Brexit done. Well, then, with that kind of majority, you're in for 5 years, and you've got to satisfy, then, those people who have, as Beth says, lent you your vote.
Yes, there's a huge public policy challenge. First, in the delivery of Brexit, because once the government is back in office and ministers are, as Roy Jenkins used to say, in central command of affairs, they've got to deliver. They've got to make it happen. They've got to show that what they've promised can be translated into practice. And that's on Brexit, where you are dealing with a lot of other players on the stage. My point earlier to Beth was, legislatively, of course the government can give effect to the withdrawal agreement because it's got the numbers. But there are other people with whom we have to interact and negotiate. And then secondly, the question is, having had those votes lent to it, can the Conservative Party craft a wider policy prospectus that will appeal to those voters whose votes have been given to them tonight?
Well, again, you've been talking about it this evening, but as those Brexit negotiations continue, you're very aware, you've heard it many, many times in the chamber of the House of Commons, the argument coming, and let's give a name to it, from people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's saying, well, we can do zero tariffs. We can go to World Trade Organization rules, and we'll put no tariffs on agricultural goods and things like that. Everything will be cheaper for the British public. But, of course, an awful lot of people in various industries would be put out of work. There'd be a complete rebalancing of the British economy. Do you think people who voted for the Conservative Party voted for that brand of conservatism?
No. I don't think people who voted for the Conservative Party tonight voted on the basis of a closely argued interpretation of tariff or non-tariff barrier policy. And I don't say that to be discourteous or insulting. I think people are making an overall judgment about what motivates them and what they would like to happen. But the idea that people have voted in very large numbers for a particular form of Brexit, I think really would be stretching a point. I don't think they've done so. I think what they've done is vote to say we are frustrated, we want to see progress, we haven't had it, let's get it. But as to the
let's get some more results.
Well,
No. John, plenty more to discuss on that issue as these results come in and put more flesh on the bones of that exit poll. Plenty more from our correspondents at Election Counts tonight. We've got so many covered, and there are some crucial votes taking place in Yorkshire and, as you've seen, in the northeast of England. There we've got Leeds, Wakefield and Hartlepool covered. Let's go to Sally Lockwood in Leeds first. We haven't visited you yet. And what's the mood there, Sally?
Well, it's very busy here, Dermot, at Leeds Arena. There are 8 constituencies being counted here at the moment behind me. 5 of those Labour seats and 3 of those marginals, 2 held by the Conservatives, which were challenged by Labour tonight, and another which was a Lib Dem target seat as well. Well, out of those 3 marginal seats, Dermot, it really does seem that only Leeds North West could be vulnerable, but that's, of course, only according to that exit poll. More will be clear after 2:30 as those results come in. But one to watch is Pudsey, which has a majority of only 331 votes for Conservative Stuart Andrew there. He lost 4,000 of his majority to Labour in the last election, but according to the exit poll, he'll hold that tonight. So we'll see. We are going to get those votes from 2:30, running to about 5 o'clock. We've been told we will have to clear out if the counting goes on beyond that, because they need to set up for a Venga Boys concert for tomorrow night.
John Bercow saying, what? Who are they? A popular beat combo, my lad. OK, let's talk to Nick Powell in Wakefield now. Well, even before the voting took place, we think it could be, well, a narrow squeak or maybe a heavy defeat there for Mary Craig.
Yeah, I think she is probably facing a defeat, Dermot. No beat combos here, John Bercow will be delighted to know. But a Labour source has told me already, who's involved with one of the other 2 seats here, that he thinks Wakefield is gone, that Mary Craig's insistence on beating the Remain drum is going to cost her in an area here which is very heavily Leave at the referendum. And if you assume that that is correct, that leaves 2 other red bricks from that wall. Are they under pressure as well? Yvette Cooper, not part of the inner Jeremy Corbyn sanctum, got twice as many votes, almost exactly as the Conservative last time. The feeling on the Labour side is that she may be OK. And John Trickett in the Hemsworth constituency, who is in the shadow cabinet, he too not certain to survive. Such is the scale of the Labour collapse in this part of the country and indeed around the country, John.
My goodness me. OK, Nick, plenty more to check in with you when the time comes. Let's go to Gerard Tubb, though, in Hartlepool. And Gerard, very interesting there, given what we've seen happening already in parts of the North East. Yes, a good performance by the Conservative Party, but the Brexit Party doing well, and their chairman standing there.
In a constituency that's had a Labour MP for 55 years. Richard Tice, of course, could pick wherever he wanted to go. He and Nigel Farage have put this party that Nigel Farage said is a company, not a political party, together. So Richard Tice chose this seat because he thought that 7,650 majority that Mike Hill, the Labour MP, had was vulnerable. 70% voted to leave here. But boy, this doesn't feel like a Conservative seat. High unemployment, high benefit rates, more chance of dying on average young if you live here, lower education attainment on average, etc. Not that many professionals. They haven't voted, if they've voted Conservative here, for a small state, for individualism, for freedom of trade. They voted because 7 out of 10 who voted at the referendum want out of Europe. The question is, can Richard Tice capitalise on that frustration? Have they voted for him? Looking at the votes tallied up on the table now, Mike Hill looks to have more. Of course, you don't know, because you don't know which wards have been stacked up there, but there's plenty on Richard Tice's table. Plenty on the Conservatives as well. It's going to be quite tight.
Gerard, thank you very much indeed. Goes without saying, back with you later, of course, and thanks to Nick and Sally as well. We're live in many more counts like those as well. We're watching Sheffield, one of the significant developments there. The Lib Dems have hopes of regaining Sheffield Hallam, the seat held by Nick Clegg, which he lost in 2017. Also watching Doncaster. There are 3 Labour-held seats. Well, they were Labour-held, at least one of which a major poll suggested was at risk of falling to the Conservatives. That's also true of Grimsby. Labour's majority is just 2,500, and you've of course seen that That was one of the seats Boris Johnson campaigned in towards the close of the campaign. Well, listen, let's talk to the Brexit secretary. Now, not the Brexit secretary, it's Michael Gove. Yes, there he is, Michael Gove. Very good to see you. Tell me this, do you believe the exit poll? Are you heartened by it?
Well, I think it's still too soon when we've only had a limited number of results declared to be confident that the exit poll is right in all its particulars. But I do think it points to the fact that Jeremy Corbyn appears to have been decisively rejected by Labour voters. And I think that there are three things that we can draw so far from what we've seen. The first is that Jeremy Corbyn's approach to Brexit, his failure to ensure that he honoured his manifesto commitment in 2017 to get Brexit done, that's clearly hurt Labour. I think it's also the case that the more that voters saw of Jeremy Corbyn and his approach both on national security and on economics, the more they felt that he was not the right person to be Prime Minister. And I think the third lesson that we should draw from this is that, related to the first, people wanted a democratic vote to be respected. They've looked at Parliament over the course of the last 3.5 years. They've seen that a variety of MPs have been, trying to frustrate that verdict, and they wanted to make sure that they had a strong Prime Minister who would deliver. That appears to be the verdict. OK,
and it appears to have resonated. Let's talk, Mr Gove, about the seats we have seen declare. I mean, did you expect, you're out in the campaign trail, of course, did you expect to do so well in those parts of the North East? These are, in the main, Labour redoubts.
It's certainly the case that we have some very good candidates in the North East, and Ian Levy, who won in Blythe, a mental health worker in the NHS, is someone who I know will be a superb MP. But I'll be honest, I didn't expect that we would necessarily win that seat. I'm delighted, though, that Ian has. I know he fought a brilliant campaign.
But, I mean, there is the fact, looking at it as well, the Brexit Party also doing well, and Boris Johnson said, didn't he? He said, well, if you vote for the Brexit Party, you'll be taking votes away from us and you may let Jeremy Corbyn in. It seems that may not be the case, almost certainly won't be the case according to the exit poll, but nevertheless, you might have done even better, perhaps, in some of those seats that have already declared if the Brexit Party weren't there.
I think that is probably true. Again, I want to be cautious at this stage, perhaps more cautious than you'd like, Dermot, so my apologies. But we're still to see what the pattern is across the country. But it was certainly the case that we argued during the election, and I think it's true, that a vote for other parties other than the Conservatives risked us not getting a majority. People understood how important it was, I hope, that we didn't repeat the mistakes of the past and have a hung parliament.
Well, let's get back to the central promise. You say that it seems to have unlocked this general election. That is, of course, getting Brexit done. Do you really believe that Brexit can be done in the form of the withdrawal agreement? Well, yes, that's almost certainly going to pass if it is a majority of that size. But do you really think that Brexit, all of it, can be done and dusted by the end of the year?
Yes.
Not this year, by the end of next year. That a trade agreement, as Michel Barnier says, not really any chance whatsoever, a comprehensive trade agreement can be renegotiated with the European Union in 11 months.
Michel is a tough negotiator. He would say that at this stage in the negotiations. But if we look at the past, it was the case that when Boris Johnson was renegotiating the withdrawal agreement, people said, you can't change a word of it. And he said, well, in particular, I want to get rid of the backstop. And they said, oh, you can't do that. That's inviolable. But the Prime Minister succeeded in changing the withdrawal agreement, which nobody said could be done, and getting rid of the backstop, which, again, very, very few people acknowledged was likely to happen. So, of course, I think it's important for us to recognise there's a lot of work to be done, but we can do it, and we must do it as quickly as possible.
And if it can't be done, if it finds you run into some difficulties, isn't it prudent to have an extension to the transition period in place as Theresa May negotiated? Or are you saying we will never use that under any circumstances?
A long time ago, I was a reporter. Deadlines concentrate minds. And it's really important that we get this withdrawal agreement through the House of Commons by January the 31st, and we can then get on with making sure that the other policies which were in our manifesto, which the public will expect us to deliver on, additional investment in the NHS, in fighting crime and in levelling up educational opportunity, are delivered as well.
But you'll be aware, obviously, that deadlines have been missed by this very Prime Minister, who was going to die in a ditch if we didn't leave by the end of October. You know, on a pragmatic basis, he... for necessary reasons, and it seems been vindicated in the strategy if this is going to be the election outcome. But nevertheless, if circumstances dictate, you don't know what's out there, an extension might be useful.
Well, I think that everyone knows, and certainly if this exit poll is correct, the majority of the public appreciated, that the fact that the October the 31st deadline slipped was through no fault of the Prime Minister's. It was because there were individuals in Parliament, you know, they... perfectly respectable arguments they made, but they ran counter to what now appears to be the strong public desire to have secured our exit in a timely way.
But, I mean, have they voted for that date at the end of 2020, or have they not just voted, people not just voted for January the 31st? Get that withdrawal agreement through, and then the legal leaving of the European Union has taken place. Yes, Britain has left.
Yes.
But that's what I'm saying, that's what they voted for. They haven't voted for the end bit. Have they voted for what happens at the end of 2020, according to your timetable?
Well, again, being cautious, if it is the case that we have a majority, then people voted for the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. It's his victory, and the Prime Minister was very clear that he would use a mandate, if the British people gave him one, to make sure that we had the withdrawal agreement concluded by the 31st, and we then moved quickly and expeditiously to secure a new arrangement with the EU based on free trade and friendly cooperation. Yeah. But we can do that in a timely way, absolutely.
OK, and what about no-deal planning? I know you were asked this during the general election campaign. Are you going to keep that going in case the talks don't go well and you will stick to leaving leaving the transition period at the end of 2020?
Well, I think that quite a lot of the planning that was called no-deal planning was planning for life outside the single market and the customs union. And that work of preparing Britain for life outside the European Union will go on. But we know now, if this exit poll is correct, that the government should have a majority which will allow us to conclude a good deal. As the Prime Minister said, an oven-ready deal which we can get done by the 31st. OK, Michael Gove, thank you very much indeed. Off to your counter, I know. Thank you very much indeed. Maybe talk to you a bit later. Well, the results starting to come in fairly quickly. I think it's going to speed up an awful lot more later in the evening. Middlesbrough, there, we don't have the numbers for you. Labour hold there in Middlesbrough. Andy McDonnell, as John Bercow is helpfully pointing out there, for Labour back in. We haven't got the numbers, but it's always interesting to see, as we've been finding out, just that change in share, just how deep the Conservatives, or not, they've managed to penetrate into seats like that. We'll get those numbers for you, and maybe my colleague Ed Conway has them. He's certainly going to show us what the results that have come in so far, combined with the exit poll, tell us. Ed?
Yeah, that's right, Dermot. I mean, let's look at the big picture, and here we have a very big picture indeed for you. Have a look at those numbers so far. So you can see those results so far. 5 seats for Labour, 1 for the Tories. Actually, a bit of a surprise that the Tories got that Blythe Valley extraordinary swing. And then have a look beyond that. Let's fly beyond that scoreboard to see the map of the UK slowly colouring in. You can see largely kind of north-northeast and seats that are the first ones typically to declare, and we have those results through. But gradually over the course of the evening and through into the morning, we'll see that map start to be coloured in, and we will see some interesting stories across the UK, especially if that exit poll is right. And it looks rather like, from some of these results, like it's not all that far off. But it will be time until we can actually see enough results to see. But listen, as we saw, Newcastle upon Tyne won that race. Remember that first race to be the first constituency to declare, and it was Newcastle upon South this time around, narrowly beating Houghton and Sunderland South Labour candidates Chion Warra and Bridget Phillipson, the first to be declared back in 2017, and the same again this time around. Chion Warra the first this time. And let's have a look to other constituencies around the UK. In particular, I mean, when it comes to Labour, Durham North West, I mean, think about this constituency. Laura Pidcock, until recently, I mean, still talked about as a future Labour leader.
Cutting you off, Swindon North, we alerted you to that. It's about to declare. Let's have a look here. Conservative seat in the last Parliament.
That the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Bentley, Andrew Headley John, commonly known as Andy Bentley, Green Party, 1,710. Critchlow, Katie, Liberal Democrats to stop Brexit, 4,408. Lineker, Catherine Sarah, commonly known as Kate Lineker, Labour Party, 16,413. Tomlinson, Justin Paul, the Conservative Party candidate, 32,584.
OK, well, there we have it. A Conservative seat before the election, staying a Conservative seat with an increased majority there. Justin Tomlinson increasing that majority for the Conservatives to 16,000 at the last election. It was half that. It was 8,335. It is also the constituency that contains the Honda factory, of course, having major concerns about its access to European markets after Brexit. But a poor performance there from the Labour Party as well. Justin Tomlinson, as I say, doubling that majority. Let's go through these numbers for you. Nearly 60% of the vote for the Conservatives, the Labour on half that, around about 30%, the Lib Dems increasing. And there we have it. The Conservatives putting on 5.5%, the Labour Party going down 8.6%, the Lib Dems, well, a decent performance, up 4.4%, and the Greens also increasing their share of the vote. Now, we mentioned that the result from Middlesbrough, the fact that Labour had held on there in the form of Andy McDonald. So let's take you through those numbers. We're so interested in these changes in share and in these seats, these Labour-held seats from the last Parliament, how the Brexit Party's been doing. Well, you can see the answer for yourself there in Middlesbrough. Not too well from the Brexit Party's point of view, but Andy McDonald clearly lost their deposit there with just over 200 votes. But let's look at the top. Labour on 17,202 and Ruth Betson for the Conservatives on 8,800, and an independent there coming from the council there with 14.2%. That's from a standing start, so that's their share of the vote. Let's look at the change in share. Labour down again, 12.2%. The Conservatives more or less level pegging. That independent taking 14%. The Lib Dems up a shade, as are the Greens and the Brexit Party. Now it's just gone a couple of minutes after midnight. You're watching the Brexit election on Sky News. Better take you through the headlines. So far, the first results are in, and the Conservatives have gained a seat in the few that have declared in the North East. Blythe Valley, but Labour held Newcastle Central and Houghton and Sunderland South, but with reduced majority.
Julie Elliott, Labour Party, 18,336.
In Sunderland Central, Labour held the seat, but with a reduced majority of just under 3,000. Results just in, you've just seen there in Swindon North, Conservatives have won with an increased majority. And John Bercow, former Speaker, has told us the early results are looking catastrophic for the Labour Party. The exit poll for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News has predicted the Conservative Party will win this general election and some, with 368 seats. If that happens, that would equate to a majority of 86 for Boris Johnson. Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is forecast to win something around 191 seats. Now, that would be Labour's worst performance since before the war, since 1935. The Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, told us appropriate decisions would be made about Jeremy Corbyn's future. And after the exit poll, Boris Johnson thanked voters on Twitter, saying, "We live in the greatest democracy in the world." But Michael Gove has told us it's still too soon for the Conservatives to be celebrating. Well, you are watching the Brexit election live here on Sky News. What an extraordinary night it's panning out to be. Not an enjoyable one, though, if the exit poll is to be believed for the Labour Party. Dawn Butler, the Shadow Equalities Minister, joins me now. Very good evening to you, Dawn Butler. It's looking pretty bad on that exit poll. Do you believe it?
Well, I've travelled around the country and I must admit it hadn't felt that negative. So I really do think we need to see how the rest of the night pans out. But on the results coming in, on the swing, you know, against Labour, it does seem and feel quite devastating. And
did you go to the northeast because that's where these?
Really quite disappointing.
I mean, did you go to the northeast because that's where the majority of the results have come in from so far? And Labour down, 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 and down, and out in Blythe Valley.
Yeah,
unimaginable a couple of elections ago.
Yeah, it is. And Brexit obviously played a huge role there. You know, Ronnie was telling people to vote Conservative to get Brexit done. And, you know, you cannot deny that that was a great soundbite. You know, get Brexit done. It's very simple to digest. It's very simple to repeat. The fact that it isn't true and you can't just get Brexit done didn't really matter. So,
well, people are just sick of hearing about it. I mean, and talking about sick of...
I mean, we're all sort of sick of Brexit, but the whole point is it's not going to be done, and it can't be done simply.
But on the issue of being sick of things, they were also sick of Jeremy Corbyn. Did you not hear that? I mean, a lot of candidates, I don't know if you did, but a lot of candidates didn't mention the leader while they were campaigning to try and get it back in. A lot of Labour candidates, no mention of Jeremy Corbyn, but it was brought up on the doorstep, was it not?
Oh no, I don't think that's true. 100% true. I mean, it is true that there were some things that were mentioned on the doorstep, mainly what was parroted from the media and what was out there.
The polls also tell us that as well. I mean, he had these record low ratings. They weren't made up by the media. These were detailed polls.
No, but the media contributed to it, and that's the point. And also, you know, if you look at the fact-checking sites that talked about the advertisements that were placed by the Conservatives, 88% of them were false. So a lot of that contributed to it. But ultimately, you know, we do have to look at these results. We will have to analyse them, and we will have to look at where we go from here. Well, is it just a matter of
calmly analysing them? Beth, come in on this.
Just your colleague, Gareth Snell, he has just said Stoke Central. He's said he thinks he's lost his seat, and he said publicly that he thinks that Jeremy Corbyn should resign. I mean, this would be the worst result in terms of seats for the Labour Party since 1935. I mean, it's quite something. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn can't stay on, can he?
The thing is that elections and politics is pretty bruising. And when you're going through it, and when you've put all of your heart and soul into an election campaign, to then turn around and be faced with the possibility of losing your seat, it is really hard and tough. And I think that, you know, we've really got I've got to thank all of the Labour supporters that have been out there that have worked their socks off.
A lot of Labour MPs
over the last 6 weeks.
I mean, if Labour have actually really seriously lost 71 seats, Jeremy Corbyn can't stay as leader, can he?
Well,
you can't honestly say...
If we've lost 71 seats, it will be absolutely devastating. And you know, I also want to consider all the people that would have lost their seats.
Let's just bring in the recent record with John Bercow, who sat there watching it all. You know, you lose one election, you tend to stand down. You know, Gordon Brown, well, David Cameron lost a referendum, you go. This would be 2 elections, because let's not forget, Jeremy Corbyn lost the last election as well, kind of almost spun it as a victory. But, I mean, could you imagine him staying on?
Well, the Labour Party will have to make a decision about that for itself, and I'm quite certain that it's something to which Jeremy Corbyn will give thought. He may well have reflected on it already, I don't know. But it seems to me that, you know, that's a judgment for the Labour Party. Certainly the result, if it is as foreshadowed by the exit poll, is, just as a matter of fact, the worst result for the Labour Party for a very, very, very long time. I think I'm right in saying in 1983, Labour got 209
209
seats.
with Michael Foot.
you know, it is less.
But let's
than that.
stay
It's
with
fewer
leadership
than that.
and flip it round, Dawn Butler. Do you want him to stay? Do you still see him as an asset, Jeremy Corbyn?
Do you know, I think just so early on in the evening, I think we really have to wait, and then we really have to reflect quite seriously about where we go and the direction of travel for the Labour Party. But I think it's just too early in the evening to be talking about that, to be honest.
I agree with that, because a political party, in the face of a defeat, has to have a debate. And although, of course, it's an absolutely natural media reaction to want to see a scalp, an individual...
It's not a scalp. I mean, it was just dealing... I mean,
there has to be a debate about the direction of the party, what the policies might be in the future.
It's interesting, though...
What sort of different direction it should chart.
But John, it's about the numbers, if they are the numbers.
Leadership comes into it.
And we're seeing that direction of travel.
Can I just... Because Sam Coates, my colleagues, just tweeted this out about the pattern for Labour. It's not just about Brexit. He's saying, from the exit poll, if you extrapolate it out, it looks like Labour are down everywhere in both Leave and Remain voting areas. So that is not just about Brexit. It also is about Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, isn't it?
But it can also be about how we portrayed Brexit for a long time.
You can't frame it as just a Brexit issue. There's something else going on
But
here.
you still can, though, because people on both sides, we were trying to unite on both sides, which was a difficult,
close to this argument again
difficult road to travel.
The voters being misled, being gullible.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that our position in the Labour Party for a long time, people kept saying, we don't understand your position. And that would have affected how people thought about
Did you find it difficult to sell?
views.
Did you renegotiate in 3 months and then have a referendum? Did you find it difficult for people to get their head round that, what precisely you were offering?
Well, I was very clear on my positions, because I was very clear that I wanted to remain in the European Union, but also very clear that we still need to. I mean, let's not forget, we still need to reunite and unite the country. And I don't think that this result is essentially going to do that. So I think that by the end of this week, we're still going to be talking about what happens next, and the country's still going to be very divided.
Don't know if you can stay with us, because Beth, referring there, we're communicating with Sam Coates through Twitter. Well, we can talk directly to Sam. This sounds really interesting. Just take us through some of those numbers, if Dawn Butler will stay, and we'll have a look at those. Sam.
Of course, Dermot. So we've been crunching the numbers and looking at the different trends up and down the country, using the exit poll mainly with my colleague Will Jennings, and we found something quite stark. When it comes to the Conservative vote, there you see the Conservatives doing better, clearly doing better in areas that voted to leave more strongly. But when it comes to the Labour vote, well, as you've been seeing from all of the, 8 results that we've had so far, it's down pretty uniformly, whether it was a Leave seat or a Remain seat. And that's just a complication for those in the Labour Party who are trying to pin tonight's bad result, as John McDonnell was, on Brexit. Dermot.
OK, well, Dawn Butler, answer that. What do you put it down to, then? Leave and Remain seats. So far, you're right, early days, but on the hard and fast facts that we've got so far, you're not appealing to anyone.
But I still think it's to do with the messaging. At the end of the day, I can easily concede that the Conservatives had a very clear message.
OK, but what about your message?
It was very, very clear.
What about your message, and who formulated that? That would be the leadership,
perhaps. Our message wasn't as clear as it could have been and should have been. We've got to admit that. We have to admit that.
But Dawn, you have to
but it was the
concede
leadership
it was
that came
about
up
the
with it.
leadership as well. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn went into this election the most unpopular leader since polling began. He did pick up a bit, but his polling ratings were terrible. You must be able to recognise that he was part of the bloc on Labour in this election and has to take responsibility for this performance, if that is correct, that poll.
Well, Jeremy is the leader, so of course he will have to take responsibility. That's what the leader's role is to take responsibility for the team.
What form does that take?
And so he will have to take responsibility.
What form might that take?
Well, as I've said, it's not something... I mean, I've never been a kind of person, when Labour lost in 20, I've never said, Gordon Brown has to resign. That's not the person that I am. I think that we have to reflect the direction of travel and where we go, and we have to take an approach about that. I'm not going to sit on here and say, oh, yes, such and such has to go. That's not the way I think we should conduct politics. And I think the lesson from this election is that we really need to do politics differently, and we need to be a little bit more measured, and we need a bit more control in what we do.
Yeah. I've known Dawn for 15 years, and she's loyal to the Labour tribe and loyal to her core, and being the loyal person she is, I wouldn't expect her for one moment to call for the resignation of her leader.
No, but the other factor might have been the lack of appeal. The other factor might have been the lack of appeal of Jeremy Corbyn, but it could also be the messaging, as Dawn Butler was saying, then get Brexit done, pure and simple message, you know, renegotiate and then have a referendum at some point. It's a bit more complicated. It could have been that.
And the point is, it's not...
it could well have been that. Yeah.
I mean, true.
The clarity and starkness of the Conservative message manifestly has resonated. Now, the fact that it has resonated because there was a slogan that resonated doesn't necessarily mean that that message is correct. What it means is that that message has worked for now, and it certainly does appear to have worked. I don't detract from that, but it doesn't mean that the message itself is necessarily correct in all its particulars.
OK, listen, we're going to get back to Scotland, I'm told. Dawn Butler, thank you very much indeed for coming in, and we'll leave you to go and reflect and consider what the future holds, perhaps for the leader and indeed for the party. Very good to see you, Dawn Butler. Listen, we're going to Scotland, as I say, and Tommy Shepherd is the SNP candidate for Edinburgh East. And let's check in, first of all, Tommy Shepherd, on how you're feeling. Do you think you're going to become the MP for Edinburgh East again?
I hope so, Dermot. Good morning from Edinburgh. It's looking quite good in Edinburgh East, yes, and certainly for the first time ever, it looks as if the SNP has won the postal ballot, which is not something we've ever done before, so it augurs well for a good night ahead.
OK, and we have to get straight into the issue of a referendum, an independence referendum as well. On the exit poll, no results in yet in Scotland, of course, but on that exit poll, 55 seats, that would be right back up towards the 2015 performance. What does that mean for an independence referendum in your view?
Yeah, well, it would, but I mean, at this point in time, I'm taking the exit poll with a big pinch of salt until we can see some hard results. That exit poll is not in line with other polls during the campaign. It's not in line with our own data, so it would be quite a surprising and shock result were it to be true. We're contesting 59 seats in Scotland. If we win 30 or more of them, then we will regard that as a victory, and it looks as if we're on course to do a lot better than that. And in answer to your question about the referendum, Dermot, we put 3 propositions before people in this election. 1 was to lock Boris Johnson out of government, 2 was to escape Brexit, and 3 was to assert the right of people here to choose their own form of government. And it does look as if we've received a resounding endorsement of all 3 propositions. So I think we're honour-bound now to pursue that mandate with the UK government. And it's for them to decide what they want to do about it.
Yeah, but 1 and 2 aren't going to happen, that's for sure, on that exit poll. How does 3 happen, though? How do you get that past Boris Johnson and Westminster, who have to legislate to allow it?
Well, it looks as if the people of Scotland have spoken very loudly and firmly tonight with one voice, saying that they do believe that whether or not Scotland should choose a different form of government should be a matter for the people here. And that's the principle we've been trying to establish in this campaign. I'm not expecting Boris Johnson to suddenly support Scottish independence. We've simply been saying that when and whether there is another referendum, that should be a matter for people in Scotland and for the elected Scottish Parliament, not for Westminster. I would hope that he might want to listen in the morning to that voice. And if he doesn't, then frankly, I don't know how many more mandates we have to get before he will.
OK, Tommy Shepherd, thank you very much indeed. We'll let you go and find out how you've done there, if you're going to be returned to Westminster. Let's get more now from our correspondents. It's the election counts tonight, so many dotted across the UK. There are some crucial results due from across the Midlands, that's for sure. Sky's Martha Kellner is in Fenton, that's near Stoke-on-Trent. Martin Brunt, come back Martin, is in Chesterfield, and Dominic Waghorn is in Birmingham. Well, let's go to Martha first. Now, Stoke-on-Trent, 3 seats there. One of them was in Conservative hands. What about the other 2?
Yeah, it's been a huge battleground during this election. As you said, 3 seats being counted here. Stoke-on-Trent South, Central and North. As you mentioned, Stoke-on-Trent South is already in Conservative hands. Jack Brereton won this seat in 2017. He became the first Conservative electorate to be elected here since the 1930s. But the Conservatives tonight are hopeful of taking those other 2 seats. In fact, I've just been speaking to the Labour incumbent for Stoke Central, Gareth Snell, and he's incredibly dejected. He says if those exit polls are correct and if there's 71 seats gone, he's convinced that his will be one of those, and he is furious with Jeremy Corbyn. He says these traditional Labour heartlands have been completely neglected, and he says in many ways this is an election decided along Brexit lines, but it's also a failure of leadership. He says he's calling for Jeremy Corbyn to go, but we'll get a clearer picture here once the declarations are made. We're expecting around 4 to 5 a.m. this morning.
OK, Martha, thank you very much indeed. Well, Martin Brunt is in Chesterfield, where, amongst others, the Bolsover count is taking place. Well, tell us about Bolsover and Dennis Skinner.
Well, people bandy around the phrase the end of an era if the predictions are right, and the Tories have taken this from Dennis Skinner. That phrase really would apply. He's been the MP here for 49 years. This has always been a Labour seat. They say round here, come election time, that if you put up a Jack Russell and pinned a red rosette to it, it would win for Labour. There's no sign of Mr Skinner yet. And as you can probably see, Dermot, we're not being allowed into the counting hall. So Mr Skinner's not here. The Tory candidate, Mark Fletcher, the grandson of a miner, he won't talk to us either. I think perhaps, although everybody's aware of the predicted results, it may go down to the wire. So nobody really wants to come and talk to us officially at this stage. But we've got a long time to go. This is a very rural area. The votes have taken a long time to get here, and we probably won't get a result, confirmation of that predicted result, until about 4:30.
OK, Martin, thank you very much indeed. You say that's a very rural area. Let's go to a very urban area. Dominic Waghorn there in Birmingham, and 2 seats in particular where we're looking at there. We're hearing from that exit poll. Anyway, Dominic, Erdington, Jack Dromey's seat, and Northfield, both Leave-leaning constituencies.
That's right, Dermot, and being Britain's second biggest city, a lot of votes to count here, so an even longer night for us, possibly waiting until 6:30 or 7 in the morning, possibly, if you look at what has happened in previous elections here. This isn't Newcastle or Sunderland. It's a slower, steadier rate of counting, so we may have a long wait before we find out exactly what has happened here. There are 10 constituencies in Birmingham, 7 of them being counted here, 3 of them in their constituencies. It voted by a whisker, I think 50.4% in favour of Leave. But despite that, I think Labour have been hopeful that all its 9 seats here would remain in their hands. But as you say, there are concerns about 2 seats in particular. Erdington, Jack Dromey's seat, the exit polls are suggesting that's touch and go as to whether he's going to retain his seat. In Northfield, Richard Burden, that looks like, according to the exit poll at least, that will go to the Conservatives, which would be quite an upset here. Of course, Andrew Mitchell is the only MP, Conservative MP, who has a seat in Birmingham. He's likely to retain his seat. So that red wall that we've heard about crumbling may well crumble as far south as Birmingham. And there's been some reaction to that from Jess Phillips, who, even though her constituency voted in favour of leaving in the Brexit referendum, she looks like she will be safe. She has a pretty firm majority, and the exit poll doesn't suggest that she's going to lose it. But she has been reacting with, I would say, a sort of air of despondency on Twitter this evening, 2 hours ago, saying there are very few words for how heartbroken I am for the community I represent, who have been through enough. And then an hour ago, she tweeted, "It feels like a punch in the stomach. We will all be thinking of the harm that can be done to those we care for." She's interesting, of course, because if Jeremy Corbyn does resign in the wake of these results, then she is one of those expected or likely to, or seen as a possible contender for his job.
OK, listen, thank you all. We'll be back with you all for the results as they come in. Just to alert our viewers to another count we're keeping a close eye. I'm going to talk to John Bercow in a moment. Becky and Lavery, the Labour Party chair, sitting on, in the last Parliament's a majority, around about the 10,000 mark, another seat in the North East, just north of Newcastle. We are told that it's close there, and they are going to recount there. Ian Lavery, perhaps in some difficulties there for the Labour Party. John Bercow, as you saw there, our special guest for the evening, the former Speaker. What do you think, John Bercow, about this? And let's talk personally here. You know, you were often described there as the man who partially was helping those backbench MPs block Brexit. I mean, it looks like Brexit is definitely going to happen in the form that Boris Johnson has termed it. Personal feelings on that?
Well, I always saw it as my role, Dermot, as Speaker, to stand up for the rights of members individually and of the House institutionally. It wasn't the job of the Speaker, for example, to get Brexit done, or indeed to stop Brexit getting done. It was for the Speaker to allow the House to breathe, to allow members to say what they wanted, to allow the House of Commons to debate the motions and subjects of its choice. So when members came to me and said, we want to debate XYZ motion, or we're keen to support a particular amendment to a government motion, my instinct was to be permissive and to say, yes, if that is the will, that is perfectly proper, that should happen, that should proceed. And then in terms of what the outcome was, well, that was a question of what the numbers were. The Speaker doesn't vote unless there's a tie. I had to vote once, and I voted for the first time in my speakership. But I wasn't making decisions about policy. I was simply saying, yes, the House should have an opportunity to debate this subject.
You were making decisions, and you know, you were there, controversial decisions about the rules.
Yes, I was making controversial decisions about the rules.
I mean, centuries of precedent in one case, overruling that with when you said that, well, how do we set a precedent if we don't overturn something?
Well,
do you think you went too far?
No, I certainly don't think I went too far at all. First of all, in one case, I was trying to protect the House from being, frankly, berated, harangued and intimidated into voting for something which it made it very clear it didn't want, namely the Theresa May withdrawal agreement. And I invoked precedent, and the precedent was very, very, very long established that the House shouldn't be asked repeatedly to pronounce on something where it had already made a decision. The House's decisions matter. They needed to be respected, and they shouldn't constantly be returned to day after day after day on the principle, oh, well, if you don't like it, we're just going to keep beating you over the head a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth time until you do as we, the executive, the government, say. So there I was invoking precedent to protect the House. There were instances in which I said, well, precedent isn't the only guide. If we were guided exclusively by precedent, manifestly nothing would ever change. And I made that point when, if memory serves me correctly, in January of this year, I simply allowed an amendment from a former Attorney General, and I absolutely stand by this, to a government motion to be debated and voted on by the House. And I remember the government chief whip saying to me, Mr. Speaker, you will not dictate what happens in this place. And I said to him, Julian, with the very greatest respect, I'm not seeking to dictate what happens in this place. What I'm saying is the House should decide.
But you did know what you were deciding was controversial. You had some rows in the chamber as well, didn't you?
I did have some rows in the chamber. If the Speaker of the House of Commons is going to be a craven lickspittle of the executive branch, is just going to be pushed hither and thither and told what to do, that person, frankly, will be like a floating cork in a fast stream of water. That would be an absurd state of affairs. If the Speaker is going to be browbeaten and instructed what to do, that person isn't doing his or her job as Speaker.
I mean, maybe it was just...
My job was to stand up for Parliament.
But did you pick more on the Brexiteers? I mean, Andrea Leadsom, you had some blazing public rows.
No, Dermot, I'll very happily deal with that. Let me deal with the 2 points. First of all, on the issue of Brexit, the truth of the matter is, if you look back over the years, the consistent thread in my speakership was that I stood up for the rights of minorities to be heard. When the Brexiteers were in the minority on the Conservative side, in fact, before the word Brexiteer had even been coined, they were known as Eurosceptics, I consistently gave them their head. I selected urgent questions from Bill Cash and Bernard Jenkin, John Redwood and others, because I thought the government needed to be probed, questioned, scrutinised, challenged and so on. And I remember saying to Bernard Jenkin quite recently, when he was really something of a moaning mini, grumbling at me, when I was making decisions that suited you, you weren't moaning. The reason why you're grumbling is that you don't like the decisions being made now. I treated the Brexiteers in a fair way, and I treated the Remainers in a fair way. And as for Andrea Leadsom, well, Andrea was perfectly entitled to her views. She didn't have a very strong grasp of parliamentary procedure, and she was entitled to her opinion, but she suffered from the rather material disadvantage of being wrong.
But you do accept, don't you, that we were one of the most controversial speakers of modern times, indeed of parliamentary times. I mean, there was also the question, John, about your personal relations with your staff, those allegations of bullying. I mean, it was incredibly controversial. What do you answer to those?
I answer to those as follows. First, I've never bullied anyone in any way, to any degree, in any situation, at any time. I issued a straightforward rebuttal. It is not true. Second, I would emphasise that you can just look at the facts. I had several people in my office who worked for me for year after year after year. The Speaker's Secretary, Peter Barrett, who served me loyally in that role for 8.5 years, served with me in the Speaker's office in total for 10. His deputy, likewise, 8.5 years as deputy to the Speaker's Secretary, and 10 years in post.
But I mean, that could have been put,
for 5 years,
that could have been put to a full
8
investigation that never really took place. The sense was that it was being swept under the carpet.
Well, certainly not by me. Absolutely, it wasn't swept under the carpet by me. It was for the House to make a judgment about what the procedure should be, and if somebody wanted to come forward and make a complaint, he or she should have the opportunity to do so. The particular point I want to emphasise is this, and I hope that this will resonate with people across the country. In the course of a working life, you would certainly hope that most of your working relationships succeed. 70% or more is perhaps not a bad guiding light. Some working relationships fail, and a very, very, very small number of mine in the early years did. That doesn't prove that one person maltreated another. What it proves is that it wasn't the right fit, it didn't work. I had extremely harmonious relations, both with my Buckingham constituency parliamentary office staff and with the Speaker's office staff. And I think, if I may say so, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When I stood down as Speaker, I had staff from the past making contact, saying they wanted to come back to watch the last Prime Minister's question. They wouldn't be doing that if I was some sort of ogre. I wasn't.
And what about, well, will you become a Lord? Let me put it that way. I mean, you know, what about as a former Speaker? I mean, it's customary, isn't it, to get a peerage? Do you think you will be denied one? And if you are, do you think it's going to be pettiness?
Well, we'll have to wait to see what happens.
Would you like one?
Yes. If I'm offered it, I'll take it. It has been the very long-established practice that a former Speaker of the House leaves the House after ceasing to be Speaker and tends to go to the House of Lords. So if I'm offered the opportunity to serve in the House of Lords, I say to you unequivocally that I will take it. I'm not sitting awake at night worrying about it. I'm not losing sleep. It isn't ultimately for me to decide. It's for others to judge, and I will have to rest content with whatever the outcome is. But look, the way I put it to you is this. None of us is without flaw. To err is human. I made my fair share of mistakes. I tried to get the big strategic judgments about conduct and atmosphere and opportunity in the chamber right, and decisions right about how the parliamentary estate should be run. I've no plans to die tomorrow, but if I were to die tomorrow, I'd die happy, thinking I've been incredibly lucky. I had a wonderful experience, and I'm very grateful to the House.
But on that desire for a peerage, I mean, I asked you earlier about the future. So it might not be over for you if you did get one. Politics might not be over for you. You'd be an active member of the House of Lords, would you, if you get that peerage?
Well, I mentioned to you earlier that one of my early challenges is to overcome my natural shyness, reticence and self-effacement. I mean, if I feel that I can overcome that innate caution and disinclination to express myself, and I were in a forum, a legislative chamber that gave me the chance to speak, would I sit there quiet
Well, what benches would you sit on as well? I mean, you Conservative MP, would you sit on the Conservative benches if you did get appealed?
Ordinarily, the Speaker, if the Speaker goes to the Lords as a cross-bench peer. So I wouldn't expect to go on the basis that you're suggesting as a Conservative. I left the Conservative Party on the night of 22nd of June 2009 in conformity with convention because I was elected the Speaker and the House expects the Speaker to be independent of and unconnected with party politics.
Back to politics this evening, and these results starting to come in. John Bercow, thanks very much indeed for that, but you're not going yet. You're not going anywhere for many hours yet because you are watching the Brexit election on Sky News. It is... I can't see the clock. The camera's covering it. 3 minutes past one. Too engrossed there with John Bercow. The headlines so far and the first few results are in. Conservatives have gained a seat in the North East, Blythe Valley, and they've held on in Swindon North with a bigger majority.
Justin Paul, the Conservative Party candidate, 32,584.
And there have been shock results for Labour in the North East. In Sunderland Central, Labour holding the seat, but with a much reduced majority of just under 3,000. And these results that we've had so far, many more to come, of course, they are in line with this exit poll for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News. That predicted the Conservative Party will win the general election with 368 seats. That would mean a majority of 86 for Boris Johnson. Labour support has been projected to go down everywhere in both Leave and Remain-leaning seats. The Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, told us appropriate decisions would be made about Jeremy Corbyn's future. And after the exit poll, Boris Johnson thanked voters on Twitter, saying we live in the greatest democracy in the world. A declaration now in the West Midlands. One of the first is the seat of Nuneaton, as you can see there, voted Leave. Let's listen in.
Sir, at the above election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Brighton Knight, Richard Adrian, Liberal Democrats, 1,862. Jones, Marcus Charles, the Conservative Party candidate, 27,390. Condaka, Keith Anthony, Green Party, 1,692. Mayu, Zoe Christie, Labour Party, 14,246. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Want of official mark, 0. Voting for more candidates.
Well, there we are in Nuneaton, a Conservative seat after the last election, but a bigger majority now for Marcus Jones, an increased majority up there to 13,144 from around about 4,700 last time round. So a big increase and a big pushback again for the Labour Party. You must remember that this actually was a fairly marginal seat 4 years ago or so, and the Labour Party pushed back to 14,000 or so votes. It is a Leave-tending seat, one that voted to leave in the European Union referendum in 2016. But John Bercow, I say, back to business. Look at that increase in vote share for the Conservative Party. 60% of the vote there in what was once, it's not anymore, a marginal seat, and the Labour vote down there about 10%.
Yes, it's very striking. Marcus Jones has tripled his majority. And to put it in context, as you rightly said, it has been a marginal seat, and that includes having previously been a Labour seat. Marcus Jones has been the Member of Parliament since 2010, but no way would anyone ordinarily characterise it as a safe seat. It's not the sort of seat, Dermot, for the benefit of your viewers, that one would expect to see a 60% share of the vote going either to the Conservative or to the Labour candidate. So obviously it is a commentary on the campaign and no doubt to some degree also on the prodigious efforts of Marcus Jones that he's got up to 60% of the vote.
Political editor Beth Rigby, I mean, we're seeing this now, it's pattern, it's still early days, but the exit poll, we're seeing this pattern of the Conservative vote going up all over the place, all parts of the United Kingdom that have reported so far.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, what's happened is there was a framing battle, if you like, between Labour and the Conservatives. Labour wanted this to be the NHS, the austerity, the cost of living election. Boris Johnson, his three-line strap, get Brexit done. He had the Vote Leave team from the 2016 referendum in his camp. You remember their slogan of 2016 that also won that referendum, take back control. A very simple slogan. And tonight, what is clear is that if there was any hope of turning this into a different sort of election from Labour, they have they have lost, and they have lost definitively. And that red wall isn't just wobbling. I mean, it's been obliterated.
Bulldozed.
Yeah.
So I get the reference there to Boris Johnson a couple of days ago. That was a polystyrene wall. Well, this one is
not bricks.
Not bricks, but made of MPs. And it does seem that if the exit poll is to be believed, it is going to tumble tonight. The prediction there that the Conservative Party will have a majority of 86. And on that note, let me bring in the Green Party's co-leader, Jonathan Bartley, in Westminster. If this does turn out to be the case, a majority of 86 for Boris Johnson and the Conservatives. In Boris Johnson's terms, Brexit is happening. The UK will leave the European Union at the end of January.
Well, we didn't vote for this election. We didn't want this election. We warned that something like this might happen. And it's a deeply disappointing night, I think, for all progressive parties. But it is Labour that have lost this. But what it does reveal is that Boris Johnson will have a 60, 70 seat majority, whatever it turns out to be, in the House of Commons. The night's young, but we'll find out in due course, but won't have achieved 50% of the vote in this country, which again underlies the need, I think, for electoral reform. We've constantly reached out to other progressive parties to work with us. They've rebuffed us. And as long as Labour continues to refuse to back proportional representation, it will always just be lining up the next Conservative government, even when the Conservative government fails to get 50% of the vote in this country.
OK, let's just stay with the system we've got. And you said, well, we didn't vote for this general election. Well, to be fair to Labour, they were reluctant, and it was really the Lib Dems, your colleagues in the Remain alliance. Did they let the side down?
Well, no, I mean, Labour voted full square for this general election. It took them a couple of attempts, but then they went for it, and they believed that they could win it. And we thought that was a very reckless thing to do. Certainly with the Liberal Democrats, we agreed with them about remaining in the European Union. We still feel that's the best thing for the future of the country. But of course, we disagree with them on a lot of things, and we disagreed with them about calling this general election at that point.
And I don't know if you've been talking to your colleagues who've stood up and down the United Kingdom, but do you go along with this exit poll prediction, one seat, Caroline Lucas, one imagines?
Well, we're going to see, I think, a big swing in somewhere like Bristol West. So we'll see what the night holds. I think that count is got a long way to go still. Yeah. But we'll have to wait and see in due course. OK, and what about the other thing the Greens stand for? In the name of the party, of course. Do you think, I mean, your vote share, looking, it's early days, isn't it, of course? We've been looking at your vote share ticking up a percentage point or two in some of those constituencies. Do you think that's also an endorsement there of your environmental warnings? I think it is. We, of course, doubled our number of councillors this year. We've doubled our number of MEPs in the European Parliament. It looks like we might just double our vote share in this election. Clearly, the climate was front and centre for us, and the climate emergency is the thing that we've got to hold this government's feet to the fire about. But let's be under no illusions. This is a very, very bad result for the climate emergency. This is a bad night for our future security. And I think we should need to take this result very, very seriously. And we need opposition MPs from right across the parties holding this government's feet to the fire about this and not get diverted simply on the issue of Brexit, because this is a bigger issue. It's a more important issue. We've been proud to have, led the agenda and pushed the other parties in the right direction, but the spotlight must not now fall off the climate emergency.
OK, but, I mean, is it a bad day for the climate emergency, as you put it? The Tories have legislated, haven't they, to go net carbon zero by 2050. Shouldn't you, and we're talking about healing the country and bringing it back together, shouldn't you work with them?
well, obviously we'll work with them where there's common ground, but if they're road building, expanding airports, continuing fossil fuel subsidies, if they're going to continue to block wind power, onshore wind, that is no way to tackle the climate emergency. I don't think this government has any real sense of the kind of change that we have to make. It isn't even including aviation and shipping emissions in its own targets. Targets, incidentally, which are too late and which it's already on track to miss. It fails on every single measure when it comes to the climate emergency.
OK, Jonathan Bartley, thank you very much indeed. Very good to talk to you. Right, more results expected very soon. Significant results for this Labour Party performance. We're expecting results coming in from Warrington very soon, and Caterina Vitozzi is in Wrexham in Wales for us. And I say they're very important. And Enda Brady is in Workington there. And in part, this election, apart from being the Brexit election, Enda, was termed as the battle for Workington, a seat that the Tories have really targeted.
Yes, they have, and they're sounding very, very confident. Declaration is imminent here, Dermot. This constituency has been Labour for 97 of the past 100 years, and the Conservatives really did target this seat. You know, of course, the phrase Workington man was trotted out by this right-leaning think tank early in the campaign, and Workington man was identified as a Northern Labour Leave voter in rugby league towns like Workington who could possibly be swayed by Boris Johnson's mantra of get Brexit done. And just looking around the room, the Conservatives are here, they're eating pizza, they're smiling, and they feel very, very confident indeed. This will be absolutely seismic if they were to win here. This having been a Labour constituency, as I say, a Labour seat for 97 of the past 100 years. We've had the turnout figures through already, 67.94% turnout. Declaration just a few minutes away, a most unlikely bellwether town really, Workington here in northern Cumbria. Labour last time round had a majority of just under 4,000. They're looking quite glum at the moment. Conservatives are smiling, as I say, eating pizza, awaiting the declaration, and we'll know in a few minutes' time.
OK, keep an eye on it for us, Enda, but in the meantime, let's check in with Caterina Vitozzi there in Wrexham. This red wall, talking about it, starts there in north-east Wales, and a slim Labour majority there.
Yes, it was really the slimmest of margins, only 1,800 votes in it between Labour and the Conservatives in 2017. And I can tell you that when those initial exit polls came out at 10 o'clock, there were a number of people gathered in the foyer area of this sports hall where the count is underway. And it was palpable, the sense of shock. Just seeing those numbers, I think it really dawned on people here who already knew that Wrexham was a marginal, that it was a tight seat, that this would likely be one of those areas where a Labour seat could, for the first time since 1935, turn blue. The Conservative candidate for Wrexham, Sarah Atherton, has been wandering around listening and sort of watching the vote counts happening here. They are feeling extremely confident. There are some very glum Labour faces in this hall behind me. It's really quite a seismic shift if it does go the way that the exit polls suggest, and if it goes the way that certainly the Conservative activists here think that it eventually will go towards that Conservative win. Seismic when you think, Wrexham is the town of miners, it's the town of steel workers. For generations, Labour is all that people here have known, will know probably in about 40 minutes or so whether that will change for the first time since 1935.
OK, keep an eye on it, Caterina. Thank you very much. We know you will. Got to talk now to the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Paul Scully. And Paul Scully, I'm sure you're aware we're keeping an eye on these declarations. Workington, you'll be very interested to hear. So we might break in, but then we will come back to you for reaction. But are you daring to dream now on this exit poll and the results we've seen so far? It looks like a remarkably good night for the Conservatives and some.
Well, look, I mean, obviously this is a projection, but it's encouraging, certainly. I think it's testament to the amount of work that candidates up and down the country have been doing. It's testament to the simple message that Boris and the Conservative government have been putting out there, that getting Brexit done means that we have a parliament that will better reflect the people, showing clear leadership, clear direction. And that's what people have been crying out for 3.5 years, to make sure that we can get on to talk about police, the 50,000 more nurses, and funding, levelling up our funding for education.
Well, you say it was a simple message. We accept that, get Brexit done. But do you think you really levelled with people that it's going to be a complex process to untangle a 46-year or so relationship?
I think the process is undoubtedly complex, but the simple message was we need to get on with it. We need to focus on how we are leaving with the EU and not getting bogged down with whether we're leaving with the EU, which we settled 3.5 years ago. So now, hopefully, although there will be differences in the debate about our future relationship, we can hopefully come down to a narrower focus of that, building that trading relationship and getting that negotiation right with the EU, so that we can both sets the EU and the UK can prosper in years to come, but also unlock the domestic agenda as well.
OK, well, what's a priority for you, just as we keep an eye on more counts? That's Derby. But Paul Scully, what is the priority for you after the Get Brexit Done? Presumably that means January the 31st. What do you want to see as the symbol of delivery for these, it looks like, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people who are voting for the Conservative Party, who haven't voted for them before? What's going to say to them, in policy terms, what's going to say to them, we hear you, we understand you?
Right. Well, first thing is, as I say, is just getting that referendum result enacted, so we're leaving. But also, I think that it's delivering things that they can actually tangibly see, that improve their outcomes, health outcomes, standards in schools, more policemen on the street to make them feel safer. It's these key things. It's not getting bogged down with a race on theoretical policies or just telephone numbers when it comes to budgets. It's what that money can actually deliver for people when they go to their hospital, their schools, and look in their streets for the policemen.
But the point is, you talk about improving health outcomes, more police on the streets. I mean, that takes years as well, recruiting and training up all that. Well, it does. Recruiting and training.
I'm saying undoubtedly it does. Yes, it does. It does indeed.
Well, indeed. But, so what's going to show them pretty soon that the Conservatives hear them? It's a different Conservative Party from the one that generations, perhaps, in their family have said, we won't touch them with a barge pole.
Well, look, we've already started recruiting the 20,000 new policemen. We've got record amount of GPs in training at the moment. But as you say, it undoubtedly takes time to get them through training. And we've got to get that first batch through, the policemen on the streets, the doctors actually in the GP surgeries and in hospital departments as well, to make sure that when we're talking about 50 million new GP appointments, people can actually see that.
OK, Paul Scully, I'm cutting across you because there's a result coming that perhaps you might want to hear, I'm sure. It is Workington, as we've been discussing. Sue Hayman was the MP there, Shadow Cabinet member for the Labour Party. Also, let's alert you, we've got a lot of W's going on here. Workington, they're about to declare. Wansbeck, you may have remembered if you've been with us, that I've mentioned before, Ian Lavery, the Labour chairman, we are told is going to declare fairly soon.
I, Andrew Seekings, being the acting returning officer for the Workington constituency, do hereby declare that the total number of votes cast for each candidate was as follows. Coburn, Nicky, Independent, 842. Hayman, Sue, Labour Party, 16,312. Hughes, Neil, Liberal Democrat, 1,525. Ivinson, Roy Allen, 87. Jenkinson, Mark, the Conservative Party, 20,000. $20,488. Perry Jill, Green Party, 596. Walker David, Brexit Party, 1,749.
Well, there we have it. Workington tumbling. As Enda Brady, our man on the spot there, was telling us Workington man was one of the phrases coined for this election. A Conservative gain from Labour. They did have a majority. The Labour Party did have a majority of 4,000. That's been almost identically reversed by Mark Jenkinson, putting the Conservatives in there with a majority of 4,176. Sue Hayman, shadow cabinet member, ejected from Parliament, and her vote share, let's take you through them. Her vote share fell quite considerably, as you know, by at least 4,000. Share 39%. This change in share is perhaps the most interesting of the evening as the Conservatives start picking up these seats that Labour used to be incredibly strong in, up 7.5%. Labour down 11.9%. The Brexit Party, a performance there, 4.2%. Sam Coates, our deputy political editor, is putting all these into his database and reading what it tells us. And what it tells us, Sam, even from down here, is that this exit poll is looking pretty accurate.
Absolutely, Dermot. That's increasingly clear. We are on course for a majority around the range of the 86 that we saw in the exit poll at 10 o'clock. Just look at the swing in that seat of Workington. Workington has been Labour since 1979. Now, there's been a swing from the Labour Party to the Conservatives in the region of 10%. So, if you look, the Tories now have around 50% of the vote in that seat, and that was what the Labour Party got in the 2017 election. So now there's a whopping 4,000 majority in this what was once an absolute Labour heartland. So I think that will be perhaps the result this evening that has stung the Labour Party the most. If we want to look at one other result, Ian Lavery, the Labour Party chairman, there were rumours that he might even lose his seat. He has hung on, but by only the slimmest of margins. We had that result in the last few minutes, and there his majority has gone down from 10,000 at this election to 814. Again, swing in the region of about 8% from Labour to the Conservatives. Ian Lavery will be glad to have hung on, but that kind of decline in his support in his seat will sting. Whether it means he doesn't run for the deputy leadership or not will remain to be seen. OK, we're just looking at that result in full. Sam, thank you very much indeed for the analysis. And back there to Workington, as Sam was saying there, getting their first Conservative MP for 40 years there, the Shadow Environment Secretary, Sue Hayman, losing her seat. I think we might be able to hear her speak in a moment or two. Yes, she is apparently conceding up on the platform there in Workington. Let's have a listen.
Staff who've stayed with me for the whole 4 years that I've been a Member of Parliament. I'd like to thank my agent, my campaign team, who have worked so hard. And I'd also like to thank my husband. Thank you.
Well, got the gist. Disappointed Sue Hayman, their Shadow Environment Secretary, losing her seat. Another gain for the Conservatives in these formerly strong Labour seats. Also seeing at the bottom of your screen there, worth keeping an eye on there, the results are beginning to pick up. The SNP with their first gain in Scotland. Now, this exit poll predicting that they'll get 55 seats, so obviously going to be some gains there if the exit poll is correct. SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon, as you can see there, saying it's going to be a good night for her party. Well, gained Rutherglen and Hamilton from Labour. Let's go to Darlington, another key seat for Labour. Let's see how the Conservatives are doing.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I, Luke Swinhoe, being the acting returning officer for the election of a Member of Parliament for the constituency of Darlington, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Brack Kevin John, Independent, 292. Chapman Jennifer, Labour Party, 17,607. Currie Anne-Marie, Liberal Democrats, 2,097. Gibson Peter Alexander, the Conservative Party candidate, 20,900. Mawson David John, Brexit Party, 1,544. Snicker Matthew Charles, Green Party candidate, 1,057. The total number of Spar ballot papers was 81. The turnout was 65.63%. And I do hereby declare that Peter Alexander Gibson is duly elected.
Well, my goodness me, Darlington falling now to this Conservative advance into Labour areas. Now, you may remember in 2017, this was a seat that the Conservatives tried very hard to take away from Labour, that Theresa May strategy, which is a kind of a pre-echo of what Boris Johnson has done and is doing this evening. But they've gained it this time. Peter Gibson elected there for the Conservative Party, taking out Jenny Chapman. Her majority, well, her vote share, she doesn't have a majority anymore. Did have a majority of 3,280. Her number of votes went down by about 5,000. The first time a Conservative has got in there since 1992. Let's have a look at the first result we were mentioning there from Scotland, and this Rutherglen and Hamilton West, an SNP gain. The other feature of the exit poll this evening is suggesting, as Nicola Sturgeon is saying at the bottom of your screen, quoted as saying, good night for the SNP as well. Does this begin to prove it? A gain from the Labour Party. It swapped hands in 2017. Labour took it from the SNP. They've taken it back in the form of Margaret Ferrier with 23,775. Labour pushed back down there to 18,545. This is the share. Then we show you the change. The SNP up to 44.2%. That's a big gain, given the way that seat has flip-flopped. 7.2% up. Labour down 3.1%. The Conservatives down 4.6%. And Lib Dems more or less level pegging. John Burker, you wanted to say something about Rutherglen, yeah?
Well, simply to say that that's a return for Margaret Ferrier. She was one of the people who came in 2015. She was, in fact, a ubiquitous presence in the House of Commons, jumping up and down every day. I remember very well. She was an immensely active member, but she lost in 2017. Now she's back and with a significant...
Interesting. I want to talk to Beth Rigby, though, about what's been going on in Workington and Darlington as well, Beth Rigby. We keep going back to it because we still have not very many results, but my goodness me, I mean, it could be, dare I use the word, a bloodbath for Labour if it keeps going like this.
It's beginning to feel that way, isn't it? And look, Labour tried to have this dual strategy on Brexit, where they faced both remaining seats in their metropolitan areas, such as London and Manchester, and then they also tried to have a vote leave element by saying that they would have this referendum and there would be a choice between a Labour Brexit and remaining in the EU. And they tried to straddle both these camps because they wanted to try and keep some of these vote leave seats, but it just appears like they are falling like dominoes. And that strategy has totally failed and comprehensively failed, and there will be a lot of soul search, and I imagine, as to whether that was the wrong...
It really is. I'm going to be talking to the Shadow Justice Secretary, Richard Bergen, from the Labour Party, in a moment or two. We're hearing he's just been lined up, as we say, but there's an awful lot for Ed Conway to take us through about how the night is panning out for both the main parties. Ed?
Yeah, come down and have a look at this. I mean, here on our map, and you can see there the scoreboard evolving. You wouldn't normally see as many Conservative seats as you see there. I mean, normally most of those seats, early declarers, tend to be in the North East. You tend to get a lot of Labour around now. But just have a look at that map. The map of Britain, the political map, changing there. You can see Rutherglen and Hamilton in the first Scottish seat just there. And just look northwest, you can see Workington, a lot of seats there in the North East. Many of them still staying with Labour, but you're seeing across much of the North East swings around 10% or so from Labour to the Conservative Party. And over the course of the evening, that map will get filled in and we will show you just how the political geography of this country is starting to change. It certainly looks like it's changing. It certainly feels like it's changing at the moment. And there are many stories that we're going to tell you about, individual stories of MPs, some of whom are facing a big surprise and a big shock at the moment, starting with Durham North West. Laura Pidcock, some people thought she might be the future Labour leader. It looks, according to the exit poll, as if she might well lose her seat. Actually, at the moment, it's about too close to call, but it really is possible that she could go, given what we're seeing elsewhere and given what we've seen in the exit poll, if she could fall to Conservative candidate Richard Holden. You can see him there. I mean, that would be an enormous blow. One of the rising stars of the Labour Party there, Laura Pidcock. And you've also got other potential monumental problems for the party. Stoke-on-Trent North, that's been Labour since 1950. That looks very vulnerable. Wrexham, Labour since 1935. Leeds since 1922, and it's Liberal before that, never Conservative. It could well go. And let's take a moment to talk about the Brexit Party, though, because we've talked a lot about the Conservative Party, we've talked a lot about the Labour Party, but what about the Brexit Party? Because the exit poll, you'll remember, suggests they won't win any seats. Their best chance was probably here in Hartlepool. So in Hartlepool, Richard Tice was facing that election there. One of the Brexit Party's biggest hopes. He might not win, but he might pick up a big share in the constituency. And the data suggests that seat is going to go from Labour, Hartlepool, Peter Mantle's old seat, from Labour to the Conservatives. Now, that would be extraordinary, but it's so interesting to see what's going on beneath the surface. Is the Brexit Party picking up votes off the Labour Party, but not necessarily off the Tory Party, allowing the Tory Party to get in there? That's the big question there. In seat after seat in the North East, we're seeing that happen in the Brexit Party. In some cases, that is allowing the Tories to do well there. And that's precisely what might well happen in other seats around the country, and particularly Hartlepool. Seemed to happen in Blythe Valley as well. Also, let's have a look down in the metropolitan areas, because this really, as Beth was saying a moment ago, you know, Labour Party hoping to do well in those metropolitan areas, hoping to do well in cities, and indeed, that's a big question that they're facing at the moment. Richmond Park might well go to Sarah Olney. It looks at the moment like there won't necessarily be as good news for Boris Johnson there. The Tory party's struggling in those urban areas, doing very well in towns. Instead, Zach Goldsmith could well lose his seat. It was just 45 votes in 2017, so very close indeed. But the interesting thing is there are diverse stories here. The Tories doing incredibly well in comparison to previous elections, in comparison to history in the North East. But in other seats around the country, they may well face losses. But overall, Dermot, I mean, as you were saying a moment ago, that exit poll does look pretty convincing at the moment, given what we are seeing in these results so far tonight.
Well, some of those historical comparisons are pretty breathtaking. Ed, thank you very much indeed. Let's see if my next guest, Labour Shadow Justice Secretary Richard Bergen, thinks so. How would you... very good evening to you, Mr Bergen. Good morning, in actual fact. How would you describe the evening and the early morning so far, and what is to come, perhaps?
Well, it's very disappointing and it's very worrying. I'm very disappointed, I'm very worried about if the exit poll proves to be accurate, as it appears like it is, then I'm very worried about all the children who will wake up in poverty, all the people who won't get paid a £10 an hour minimum wage, all the people who are homeless, all the people who won't get a council house, all the people stacked up with debt, all of the people who are going to end up languishing on NHS trolleys in our cut-to-the-bone National Health Service. I'm very, very disappointed and very, very worried about their future. It seems
I'm hearing
this was a Brexit election.
I'm hearing I'm sorry to butt in, Mr Bergen, but, you know, I'm hearing this argument. It's election night. The people have voted. It's the purest form of democracy. It's still fresh. The votes are still being counted in the majority of cases, and you're making it sound like the people have made a foolish choice. Haven't you been the ones that have let them down? If you believe that, you didn't make the case for it.
No, what's happened is we had a very similar manifesto to the manifesto at the 2017 general election, where with that manifesto and with Jeremy's leadership, we gained 3 million votes. The thing which appears to be different this time is it was an election in which Brexit overshadowed traditional party loyalties. However, I don't want to prejudge. I think we need to analyse objectively where did we lose votes and who to. in what parts of the country, and the totals and the proportions. So we need a sober, serious analysis over the next 24 hours or so.
OK, well, I can kind of answer that. Where did you lose the votes? Just about everywhere. Who to? Just about everyone. Are you beginning to believe, though, with the results we have, let's deal with the hard and fast figures, Jenny Chapman, Sue Heyman, good colleagues of yours gone. Are you beginning to think, is anybody safe in the Labour Party tonight?
Well, we don't take anything for granted. I don't take my seat for granted. That's why I've been working very hard on it. We need to look at the results that have come out, some deeply, deeply disappointing results, some fantastic colleagues losing their seats. And as I say, I'm very worried about the future of people in this country when they're going to be led by a Thatcherite like Boris Johnson. What we've had actually is the two sides of the coin of the establishment working together. The Thatcherites in the Brexit Party pretending they're not Thatcherites, and the Thatcherites in the Conservative Party, like Boris Johnson, working together, it seems, against Labour and against our Progressive Manifesto. So, of course, as when we lost 5 million votes between 1997 and 2010, when we supported policies of austerity and war, we had to analyse how we lost those and what we need to do. In the same way, after what appears like tonight's results, we need to analyse very carefully those results and work out what the Labour Party is going to do.
I mean, you've left something out on that list of what you're going to analyse. Are you going to analyse Jeremy Corbyn in his performance?
Well, of course, Jeremy, who I admire greatly, was raised by some voters on the doorstep, as Ed Miliband and Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were when I was campaigning for them as well. And yes, some people did say things about Jeremy that they'd read in the Daily Mail or seen on the TV or seen in the Sun newspaper. Of course, if these things didn't have traction, then the Murdoch press and others wouldn't bother spending the time pushing it. But actually, the interesting thing is that people on the doorstep weren't complaining about our policies, and we wouldn't have had the policies, neither the last manifesto or this manifesto, if it weren't for Jeremy's leadership. And we gained 3 million votes at the last general election. It's very, very disappointing tonight. The only difference, it seems to me at this stage, but I want to analyse it further, is the fact that this was a Brexit election. The next election won't be a Brexit election. And against a strong Thatcherite Conservative Party, we need to fight back, not triangulate, because the people who will lose out in communities across the country under 5 years of a Boris Johnson government deserve no less than a fighting Labour Party that will analyse a bad result but won't give up.
OK, Richard Bergen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Back to your account there in Leeds, the Shadow Justice Secretary. We've got Sal Brinton here, Baroness Brinton, the President of the Liberal Democrats. A very good evening to you, Baroness. Is it a good evening? It doesn't look like it for the Lib Dems, does it?
I think, actually, we know that there are still 6 from the exit poll. There are still 65 seats that are too close to call. And we know that a number of those are ones where we are hotly in contention. And what's interesting about tonight is that they're seats that we've not been particularly strong in before. So Esher and Walton and Finchley and Golders Green are just 2 examples of that. So I'm going to wait and see what comes in.
But, you know, well, let's look at the distance in terms of time between here we are with the results coming in and the beginning of the campaign. You must admit you've fallen from those mighty soaring heights of imagining that Jo Swinson might become Prime Minister. Now you're talking like you normally talk as Lib Dems, which is picking up a few seats here and there.
I think the arithmetic changed when Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson did the deal to where they stood back in half the seat, where the Brexit Party stood back in half the seats. And clearly the polls started to reflect that. What we have said over the last few weeks is that we still remain determined to stop Brexit, that we still remain committed, as it's very clear in our manifesto, that we wanted a people's vote. Jo was only talking about revoking Article 50 if she was Prime Minister. That's, you know,
clearly not going to happen. Do you think that was a bit too nuanced, though? Again, you know, against a pure slogan like "Get Brexit Done."
Our line was clear, but it often got cropped by other people.
You just became the revoke party, didn't you? Well, in a lot of people's estimate.
The front of our manifesto talked about Stop Brexit, and the one thing that we do know is tonight we're seeing our vote share has gone up. Not much, but it's gone up. And that, I think we're going to see, is going to play very well for us in the strong Remain seats where we know we are heavily in contention. Okay. So we have all to play for.
And I was talking to Richard Bergen there about leadership. I mean, are there any questions about leadership if she holds on to a seat, Jo Swinson? We're told she might be in some difficulty in East Dunbarton.
Well, again, it's one...
Would you look at that? Would that be on the list?
As far as we're concerned, the words that we've been getting during the day in her seat are things were looking good on the streets, and she's absolutely only at the beginning of her role as leader, and the party likes what she's done and the message, and absolutely we're standing full square behind Jo.
Just to jump in, if she does lose a seat, then Ed Davey will have to become the leader, won't he? That's just what will happen.
Look, it's far too early to say anything about that at all. I don't want to get into speculation, and we will see what happens. But I think what is going to be interesting is the seats that people didn't expect us to get tonight that we will get because of this issue about strong Remain votes and where we are playing very strongly. And by the way, Jo Swinson plays... the polls for Jo in those seats are strong as well.
We'll wait and see. But let's get back to that point you made about the Conservatives and the Brexit Party getting their act together on the Leave side of the equation. It didn't happen well on the Remain side, did it? You had fairly confusing messages, it seems, on the doorstep, the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, and Jo Swinson spent a lot of time criticising Jeremy Corbyn.
The main problem...
If it was a Brexit election, shouldn't you have got a more unified message?
The main problem is that nobody quite knew where Labour stood, and I think that point was amply made by Richard Bergen. They are not a Remain party. They have been arguing for a people's vote, and Jeremy Corbyn himself has been arguing that what he wants is a people's vote where he can put his Brexit plan. That is not a Remain
Well, let me ask you this,
party.
actually, looking forward. I mean, on that exit poll, you know, Remain is over, we're leaving. Would you be a rejoin party, you think, further down the line?
I think we always see benefit in us
being Beasley, being the acting returning officer at the election of a member of Parliament for
I'm sorry, Sabrin, we're getting a result in Peterborough. Scene of the by-election a few months back.
Is as follows. Bristow Paul, the Conservative Party candidate, 22,300. Ferguson Luke, Independent, 260. Forbes Lisa Jane, Labour Party, 19,700. Michael Thomas, Brexit Party, 2,127. Parkinson Martin John, the official monster raving loony party, 113. Hey! Rogers Thomas Andrew, Christian People's Alliance, 151. Selleck Rebecca Louise, Liberal Democrats to Stop Brexit, 2,334. Wells Joseph Hamilton, Green Party, 728. And I do hereby declare that Paul Bristow is duly elected Member for Parliament.
Well, there we have it. I haven't got the numbers for you. Paul Bristow, he's making his acceptance speech there again from Labour. By-election there, the original Labour MP had to stand down. A problem with the law, and there was a by-election, and there we are. Let's just take you through the numbers. I wonder if worth hearing from Paul Bristow, Conservatives there overturning the by-election result and, of course, the previous general election result on which we base the change in share of the vote. Paul Bristow, they were 22,343. Lisa Forbes, who got in the by-election, 19,744.
I would like to thank the returning officer, all the counting staff, and, of course, the police, for all the hard work they've done making sure that this count was free and fair. I would also like to thank my amazing team who've really gone the extra mile. We've been outgunned by Labour shipping in momentum activists from areas across the country today, but we have fought to the bitter end and we got the result that we deserve. And to name many of my team individually would take far too long, but I just do want to thank my agent Peter and my campaign manager Sandy, and all of you really. You know who you are, all the hard work that you've done. And finally, I just want to mention my parents Sandra and Alan, my biggest fans, who have stood with me through thick and thin. Today is a massive day for me, but tomorrow could be an even bigger day, because it's when my second child is due. So I'd like to thank Sarah and my unborn child for just waiting that little bit extra. We have won this election, yes, because we promised to get Brexit done, and yes, because Peterborough has rejected an extreme and dangerous left-wing agenda.
Yeah, we are just hearing we're cutting away from Peterborough there, again there for the Conservative Party. He's also hearing of again, seeing there for yourself at the bottom of the screen there, Conservatives gain the Vale of Clwyd from Labour. This is one of those key seats in the northeast of Wales. The so-called Chris Ruane, as John Bercow is helpfully adding there, the former MP now for the seat of the Vale of Clwyd, taken by the Conservatives, hard on the heels of Peterborough returning to the Conservatives. Let's talk to the Justice Secretary, Mr Buckland, who's in Swindon now. There he is with the blue rosette, very prominent there. It's standing proud, and presumably you are as well.
Well, I'm still waiting for the declaration here in South Swindon. The count is proceeding apace. I'm, in the well-worn phrase, cautiously optimistic. The result in North Swindon from my colleague Justin Tomlinson was a stunning 16,000 majority. So we are very hopeful in what is seen as a great bellwether of the country that both Swindon seats will stay blue tonight.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just those, isn't it? We had Peterborough, Vale of Clwyd, Workington, Darlington. You mentioned Blythe Valley. The list is being added to almost minute by minute right now, and that exit poll looks pretty on the numbers for the Conservatives.
Well, I'm very much hoping that it is, and what I'm really pleased to see is the geographical spread of seats, getting James Davies back in the Vale of Clwyd, Paul Bristow after many attempts winning in Peterborough, but those seats up in Cumbria and in Northumberland and County Durham. This is a Conservative Party that will represent the whole of the country. That will bring its challenges, yes, but it will also bring huge opportunities for the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Well, interesting what you say there. I want to pick up on that, to represent the whole of the country. I mean, you understand, of course, I mean, I know you use that phrase, but there are several countries in the United Kingdom. And let me talk about Scotland. Just hearing, we mentioned the gains for the Conservatives. Well, the SNP have taken Angus away from you, and again on the exit poll, which you seem to accept the direction of travel. In Scotland, the direction of travel is that the SNP are going to do very, very well, meaning presumably you're doing very badly. What do you think it means for the integrity of the United Kingdom if the result turns out this way for the SNP?
Well, I'm very mindful of results in Scotland, and we need to digest fully what the final picture looks like. What we must avoid is more years of damaging and wasteful debate about the Constitution. You know, Scotland decided decisively to have progressive devolution back in 1997. It's increased its powers ever since. It's a proud nation, part of our United Kingdom. I still believe passionately as a Welshman and as a British patriot that Scotland is better off with us. We are better together. And I think that message still has to be very clear from the Conservative Party, but at the same time understanding the needs of the people of Scotland, respecting that and working as constructively as possible to make sure that the whole of the United Kingdom cleaves together in a positive way.
OK, Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed. We're going to Putney. Let's see if the Conservatives can hold on here, or has the main vote in London done it? Let's listen in.
Notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Fleur Anderson, Labour Party, 22,780. Fergal Joseph Mackenzie, Green Party, 1,133. Will Sweet, the Conservative Party candidate, 18,000. Sue Wixley, Liberal Democrats. Don't know if anybody heard that. Sue Wixley, Liberal Democrats, 8,548. The total number of ballot papers rejected as follows. Want of official mark.
OK, well, they were going to get a new MP anyway because Justine Greening, who had held the seat, stood down, left the party and was not standing in Putney. But there you go, not all doom and gloom for the Labour Party. A gain there, a big gain there, 22,780 for the Labour candidates, around about 18,000 for the Conservatives. And John Bercow, so this is the mixed picture, isn't it? In a strongly Remain seat, a metropolitan Remain seat, the Labour Party vote holding up. But in so many of the seats, we haven't seen too many declare, so many seats in the North East, in Wales, Labour losing them altogether to the Conservatives.
Yes, I mean, we were doing the arithmetic between ourselves, Dermot, you and I and Beth, earlier in the evening, and it was obvious that if the Conservatives were to have a majority that big of 86, and it remains to be seen, but it's looking likely, well, it meant that they were going to have to make huge gains in the North and the Midlands because we could tell that they had lost seats in Scotland and that there was every prospect of them losing seats in London. Putney is just different. It is a very, very, very heavily Remain area. Justine Greening was the Member of Parliament there for 14 years and, in my experience, an incredibly personable and highly regarded parliamentarian in Westminster. In all likelihood, she was very well regarded locally. And I don't know, but it may be that there were some people locally who didn't much like the way she was treated in her
OK,
own
well, we're hearing in Wales, though, on the other way it's going, that Wrexham has gone to the Conservatives as well, and matching that exit poll performance. That's the first time since 1935.
And, I mean, this is so fascinating because before we began the programme, the Tories were telling me that they were nervous and they said, it looks like we've had losses in London and will we make them up by gains in the Midlands and the North? And look is what is happening. Exactly. And then there you have Putney turning to Labour. But also a delicious little morsel is that in terms of a big majority, that was buried into page 4 of the Conservative Party briefing notes that they give out, which suggests that they didn't necessarily think they were going to get such a big majority if the exit poll is correct, i.e. they were probably predicating that there would be a smaller majority, Conservative majority, than they thought they would get. So this is much more than they hoped for, which suggests that the red wall, as I said, has come down in a way that they perhaps didn't anticipate.
That's exactly what Ed Conway is going to talk to us about, just the scale of these inroads, Ed, that the Conservatives are making into these Labour territories.
That's right, but I mean, let's start with that last result, Putney, because I mean, you know, here we have it on our board, which was looking at some of the marginal Labour, Tory targets. So those are the seats that Labour wanted to win, most of them in the Conservative Party. There's Putney over there, took an up to 2% swing to win it. And there are the Conservative targets. And just to look at that, to take a glance at this board, you might have thought, oh, maybe it's not going quite so badly for the Labour Party. But let's have a look a little bit deeper into that Labour red wall. So these seats that they were defending, that they thought they might have enough strength to defend the Tories off on. This is the red wall, and this is the Labour defence, and these are the kinds of seats, many of them in the North East, here's Workington in the North West, that they expected that they might be able to hold on to, because these are very traditional Labour seats. Up to a 4% swing would have lost them these seats. It's more than 4%. It's up to a 6% swing would have lost them Workington. Up to an 8% swing would have lost them these seats. Surely, obviously, the Speaker's seat they've held on to. Up to a 10% swing would have lost them Blythe Valley, and that's indeed precisely what's happened. We're seeing 10% swings from the Labour Party to the Conservative Party across much of the North East. Not all those seats are going, but, I mean, these are enormous enormous swings by the grand scheme of things. And when you have a look at seats, for instance, like Workington, like Darlington, let's just kind of zoom into the details of these seats. So I'll change the screen and we can have a look at what's going on beneath the surface. So we're talking about kind of 10%-ish swings in both of these seats, Workington, Darlington, both Conservative gains from the Labour Party. Have a look at some of these numbers. So Brexit Leave votes. So in the referendum in 2016, about 60% voted Leave in Workington. Over here in Darlington, about 58%. Very similar story there. Under 45. How old are these constituencies? They are slightly older than the average. So the average across the UK is they're slightly older than the average. Graduates, and this is a rather interesting one, quite low in terms of the average number of people who are graduates. And let's just kind of think about that. So graduates, look at this map. Here we have Workington over there. Let's take that map and plot all of these constituencies, so these are constituencies in the UK, against their percentage of graduate voters, because we'll get a sense here of where the Tory party are starting to pick up seats. Let's move those across here onto our chart. Now, the further you go here, the higher the percentage of graduates. So this is a measure of higher education. And the interesting thing is the Tories are starting to pick up seats here, around this kind of area of the chart. You've got Workington in there, around there, where they have, on average, lower levels of graduates in the population. That's a very different kind of distribution to what we've seen in the past. So this is an interesting way in which the map is changing. Now, the vast majority, as you've seen, of these seats are grey at the moment, have yet to declare. But as the night goes on, as the morning goes on, we'll see just what this map is looking like, and we'll also plot against other things as well. Just before I go, Dermot, and shout at me if anything's about to declare, but seats in which the Lib Dems have lost their deposit. Let's just have a look at that. Should we compare that, the number of seats where the Lib Dems have lost their deposit so far, and compare it to the Brexit Party? So far, we're early in the night, but so far the Lib Dems have lost their deposit in all of these seats, from Basildon South down to Vale of Clwyd and Wrexham. It's 12 so far, 12 seats that the Lib Dems have lost their deposit thus far. How many have the Brexit Party lost? Now, they're not fighting all of the same seats, so bear that in mind, but it's 10. And the Brexit Party doing actually a little bit better than many people had expected, beneath the surface, as we were saying earlier, actually having an impact on the final result. Not necessarily winning any of those seats. The exit polls suggest they might not. But things are going on beneath the surface that suggests they are doing a little bit better than a lot of people had expected.
And things are going on right now, Eddie. I'm going to cut you off. Thurrock is declaring. Got another one coming in. Here we go. Thurrock voted Leave and a declaration imminent. We'll wait for them to speak because other dramatic things have happened. Oh, they are reading it out.
Recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Doyle Price Jacqueline, the Conservative Party candidate, 27,795 votes. Harvey Ben, the Green Party, 807. Kent John George, Labour Party, 16,313. Stone Stuart Malcolm, Liberal Democrats, 1,510.
Well, there we have it. It was a Conservative seat. It's staying a Conservative seat, and some Jackie Doyle Price returned there with a very much increased majority. It was, before the election happened, seen as something perhaps of a Labour target. John Kent, though, only getting 16,000. Jackie Doyle Price re-elected there with a majority of 11,482, coming in much more quickly. Now, Stockton North.
Kim Aidan, Liberal Democrat, 1,631. Martin Andrew, Brexit Party, 3,907. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Want of an official mark at 0, voting for more than one candidate, 26, writing or mark by which the voter could be identified, 2, unmarked or void for uncertainty, 88, a total
OK, Vale of Glamorgan, a Conservative seat. Alan Cairns was the MP there. Let's listen in. We got a declaration underway.
Canlyniadau I etholaeth Bro Morgannwg yn datgan fod y cyfanswm o bleidleisiau a roddwyd I bob ymgeisydd fel y ganlyn.
Cairns Allen, the Conservative Party candidate, 27,305.
27,305.
Lovelock Edwards Belinda, Welsh Labour,
Llafur Cymru.
23,743.
23,743.
Slaughter Anthony David, the Green Party,
Plaid Werth.
3,251.
3,251.
Williams Lawrence,
Gwlad.
508.
508.
Therefore, I give public notice that Alan Cairns is duly elected as the Member of Parliament.
Alan Cairns getting back in there in Vale of Glamorgan, slightly increased majority there, up to 3,562. Again, another rebuff for the Labour Party. Might, before that exit poll came out, been seen as one of the potential targets for Labour, but Labour's vote more or less staying on the numbers. There was an increased turnout there, which put up the number of voters. As I say, Labour more or less standing still. The Conservatives gaining 2.3%. The Green Party up 5 and a bit percent. Plaid, the Lib Dems and others all down. I'm told we are expecting a result fairly soon, staying in Wales. In Clwyd South, we've seen Vale of Clwyd change hands. Clwyd South, a Labour majority there of around about 4,300. But while we wait for more results to get in time, I think, just to check in with our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who's feeding it all in. Well, we got Putney there again for the Labour Party, but apart from that...
It's a pretty grim night, Dermot, that's right. I want to draw your attention to one result that we've had in the last 10 minutes or so, and that is of Lee in Greater Manchester. It's the seat that Andy Burnham used to hold before he became Mayor of Manchester, Greater Manchester. That has turned Conservative on a massive swing. If you look at the list of targets for the Conservative Party that they wanted to take from Labour, that was 91 on their list. It truly does suggest a dire evening for the Conservatives. Now, a few moments ago, you saw from Ed Conway on his wall how the red wall for Labour was tumbling. Some of the seats that people really didn't think at the start of this campaign would fall have now gone blue. Lee is the furthest along that list of any of them. But I think the point that Labour folk tonight are just coming to terms with is that these seats haven't been taken by tiny majorities. They've been taken by really rather big majorities. So Wrexham, 2,000 votes. Vale of Clwyd, 1,800. Lee, nearly 2,000 votes. Workington, 4,000 votes. Now, the point about that is that it's going to take not just one election, but maybe 2 or 3 general elections for the Labour Party to know that they can get places like that back. We've got shadow cabinet ministers. We've got the first one, Sue Hayman, went in Workington. But on the watch list, we've got Laura Pidcock in Durham North West, and in Kirkcaldy, Leslie Laird, the shadow Scottish secretary. I think the bloodbath is starting to dawn on Labour figures. That's why I'm being urged to mention that already figures like Lisa Nandy are under pressure to stand for the leadership if there's a vacancy anytime soon.
OK, Sam, thank you very much indeed. May have missed our attention. Some results from Northern Ireland have been coming in. The Alliance Party, first seat for them, gained from the independent. Sylvia Herman stood down there, but in North Down, taken there. DUP had hopes of that, but the Alliance Party getting in there up against 2 Unionist Party, Ulster Unionist Party, and the Democratic Unionist Party, Sinn Féin, have held on in Tyrone West. I want to talk now to the leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. Well, Nigel Farage, I mean, it's clear that in Boris Johnson's terms, Brexit is going to get done if this exit poll is to be believed, and it looks like it is to be. Are you happy about that?
Well, look, the last thing I wanted was a second referendum. That would have been absolutely dreadful for the country. And that was the main reason why I said we should stand down in those 317 seats, because they were in areas like the south of England, the southwest of England. The Liberal Democrats would have won lots of them, and they themselves now say that it rather poleaxed their campaign. So, of course, I'd prefer Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister, talking in positive terms about Brexit. The slight problem, of course, is that getting Brexit done isn't really true. because if we pass the withdrawal agreement as it is, unamended, then I fear we're in for perhaps up to 3 years of agonising negotiations.
Don't you believe him then, Boris Johnson, when he says, you know, this 11 months of transition and whatever happens by the end of 2020, it's out? You don't believe him? You think he'll go for an extension?
Well, even if he goes into this with the best of intentions, the problem with the withdrawal agreement is that it puts so much power into Mr Barnier's hands. And I would have thought they would enjoy seeing our discomfort. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we finish up with a free trade deal. I hope we don't finish up with regulatory alignment on everything from financial services to fisheries. But as it is, the way the withdrawal agreement is worded is, from a Brexiteer's point of view, not satisfactory.
You know what? You agree on one thing anyway with my guest. I'm sure you've been watching during the evening, former Speaker John Bercow, and that is John Bercow on the fact, Mr Farage there, saying that passing the withdrawal agreement is not getting Brexit done.
Well, we agree on that point, but for pretty different reasons, as I note the expression on Nigel's face shows he's relieved to discover. My position is to say that they can get the withdrawal agreement through, but there's a huge amount more to be done if Brexit is to become a reality, and that will take several years. I think, to be fair, Nigel's point is that he just very strongly disapproves of the withdrawal agreement because, and he can articulate it for himself, he doesn't think it constitutes a proper withdrawal. That, I think, is
and that's where that's obviously where you begin to differ.
I mean, I'm always happy to be obliging, Nigel, and to try to advance your own argument for you. Even if I think it is absolute copper-bottomed rubbish. Nevertheless, I'm happy to help to articulate your point of view if I'm invited to do so.
Well, what is not copper-bottomed rubbish is that people like me have campaigned for a quarter of a century for us to become an independent country. And my concern is we're leaving one set of EU treaties for a new set of EU treaties which bind us too closely in. I want us to be absolutely free. But look, that argument is one that will begin next week. For now, for tonight, I did all that I could, leading a very new party that was set up to get Brexit back on track. I tried to use whatever influence I could to stop a second referendum, and I think I've had some success.
Let me put another point to you. Well, I'll let John Bercow put it as well. Another point that John Bercow has been made about the size of the majority which is forming here potentially, and if it is on the exit poll of 86 seats. John Bercow, you put it to Nigel Farage that it frees Boris Johnson to do more or less whatever he wants.
Yeah, I'm sure the point will have occurred to Nigel. Boris Johnson can pivot either way on the back of a very large majority. He can either take the attitude, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to insist on what I've said so far, no extension to the transition period, there will be an agreement on trade, it will be out by the end of 2020, and that way he would be holding firm to what he's been saying over a period of months, and that will probably strike Nigel as more or less satisfactory. Or alternatively, he could say, I've got a big majority, it's going to take longer, I don't care what I said in the past, what matters is what I'm saying now, and I'm going to change tack. And that, I think, will bring a scowl from Mr.
Well, let's see if it does.
I mean, look, that is a very, very good point to make. The truth of it is that half the Cabinet voted Remain. Michael Gove, I was with him earlier, clearly wants the softest of all Brexits. Boris, whilst he's committed to leave, has never really, I don't think, been keen on leaving on WTO terms. And my view is a big majority means that the influence of the ERG, the influence of those who are committed Eurosceptics, becomes a lot weaker. And I would expect, I'll predict, that by the 1st of July, we will be extending the transition period out till 2022.
Well, I hate to say so, Nigel, and I'm sure it's embarrassing for you too, but I think we might agree about that.
Here we go
again.
So let me put another point to you, though. Given the performance of the Brexit Party and the seats you've stood in against those Labour MPs, doing fairly well, aren't you? I mean, would you be tempted to join the Green Party, the Lib Dems and others who are coming on this programme saying we urgently need electoral reform? It doesn't look like you're going to get any seats.
oh, look, you know, I led UKIP in 2015. We stood across the whole country. We got 4 million votes and 1 seat. That needs to change. I do believe that. I think the postal voting system is so open to fraud and intimidation. That needs to change. I think the House of Lords, the ability of governments these days to use, patronage in terms of peerages is outrageous, outdated and wrong, and that needs to change. And I also think we're going to need a written constitution because we now have a Supreme Court making political decisions without any rule book to work from. So, look, I'm a radical. I think British politics is living with a set of 19th century institutions that need to be brought into the 21st century. The problem is it doesn't suit a Conservative Party with a big majority to do any of those things.
Nigel, let me tease you. You spoke with seamless and undiluted eloquence in opposition to the use of patronage, and you referenced the House of Lords. Therefore, I think we can take it from you at 2:12 in the morning that if you are offered a peerage, you will in fact turn it down as a matter of absolute and unbending Faragian principle.
Well, that's the difference, John, isn't it? They won't even offer you one.
That's true.
And they keep trying to buy me off with one, and I keep telling them I'm not for sale, all right?
OK, well, what a matter of agreement there between Nigel Farage and John Bercow. Listen, results and coming in unexpected. Nigel Farage, you'd be interested here that Hartlepool is expected to declare soon. Richard Tice, your chairman, standing there. See if you actually might manage to get a seat. The exit poll doesn't seem to suggest that. And thank you very much indeed. We're going to say goodbye to you, Mr Farage. Stockton South, this was Labour gain in 2017, a declaration expected there. Clwyd South, you may remember me mentioning a few minutes earlier in Wales, up in the northeast of Wales there. We didn't show you the numbers, though, again there from the Labour Party. Simon Baines there with 16,222. Labour pushed back to nearly 15,000. Hartlepool, I just mentioned. Well, let's see how this one goes. Brexit Party there. Maybe the Conservatives will do well as well. Let's see how it goes. We're going to bring you that shot in a moment or two. In between time. There we are. Declaration imminent. As I said, once the seat of Peter Mandelson way back when, in those distant Blairite years, Mike Hill defending now for Labour. Declaration.
The results in this constituency, the results for a general election are declared by the first citizen of the area, which is the ceremonial mayor of Hartlepool Borough Council, Councillor, the Mayor Brenda Loynes, and I would like to invite Brenda Loynes now to declare the results of this election.
Thank you, Jill. I, Brenda Loynes, being the returning officer for the election of a Member of Parliament for the Hartlepool constituency held on the 12th of December 2019, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Bowsfield, Joseph Alexander, commonly known as Bowsfield Joe, Independent, 911 votes. Cranny, Kevin, Socialist Labour Party, 494 votes. Hagan Andrew Michael, commonly known as Hagan Andy, Liberal Democrat, 1,696 votes. Hill Michael Robert, commonly known as Hill Mike, Labour Party, 15,464 votes. Horton Stefan Richard, the Conservative Party candidate, 11,869 votes. Tice Richard, Brexit Party, 10,603 votes. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Want of an official mark, nil. Voting for more candidates than voter was entitled to, 27. writing or mark by which
Well,
voter
there we are, a
could be
dramatic result in Hartlepool, in spite of the fact that it's going down on the scoreboard as a Labour hold. Mike Hill, they're elected with a reduced majority, 3,595. But the tale of that seat, if we can go back to the numbers, is the split in the vote between the Conservative candidates on around about 12,000 and the Brexit Party around about 10,000. And the argument, remember, UKIP were second there not so very long ago. If you put those two numbers together, you actually get a Leave majority there. Perhaps Mike Hill has dodged a bullet there, so to speak. John Bercow nodding along. Right now, I'm told we are hearing Beth Rigby.
Well, I was just saying that Hartlepool was where Nigel Farage made the announcement that he was going to stand down in 380 Conservative seats, and that was their main target, really, Hartlepool. But as you can see, there's been
here we go. Here's the change in chair here. 25% increase. Blackpool South declaring right now.
Yeah, that will be long.
Conservative Party candidate, 16,247. Brown, David, Brexit Party, 2009. Coleman, Gary Ian, Independent, 368. Daniels, Rebecca Irene, commonly known as Becky, Green Party, 563. Green, William Lewis, commonly known as Bill, Liberal Democrats, 1,008. Marsden, Gordon, Labour Party, 12,557.
And another win for the Conservatives in a heavily Leave voting seat back in 2016. Scott Benton there getting in, and a very decent majority, taking it from the Labour Party majority, 3,690. Labour, Gordon Marsden had a majority in 2017 of 2,523. So another big turnover there in the north and northwest, this time in a Leave-leaning seat. Stella Creasy, we are hearing, the Labour MP down to London in Walthamstow, is waiting for her result. And there she is there with a big rosette. Oh, I'm working out there, Stella Creasy. You got the little one out tonight. Sleep or awake there?
Well, she started heckling me when I gave my acceptance speech, so she's starting to wake up a little bit. But she's 2 weeks old, so I couldn't really leave her at home.
OK. Well, indeed. And tell us, though, about the night's personal results aside. Well, tell us about that, first of all, because there is a tale of two elections, at the very least, isn't there, developing for the Labour Party?
Yeah, look, I'm extremely honoured that the people of Walthamstow have yet again voted for me to be their MP, and acutely conscious they don't just need a Labour MP, they need a Labour government. And I can't pretend that what is happening across the rest of the country isn't absolutely devastating. I'm gutted to see very, very good colleagues who I know, just like me, are passionate about their local communities, passionate about this country, not being returned to Parliament. I am very concerned about what Boris Johnson could do, especially if he gets the majority people are talking about, and very aware that we've had 10 years of austerity, bleeding dry communities like this. We're now possibly facing a very hard Brexit, and that raises some really tough questions for people like me and the Labour movement, which I've been part of for over 27 years now, about why we weren't able to win the trust of the British public at this point in time to offer them an alternative.
And is this inquest going to focus on that? You mentioned the message, but what about the medium through the form at the top of the leader? Do questions need to be asked about Jeremy Corbyn?
Look, I'm sure there will be questions asked about all sorts of things, yes, including leadership, also including policies, including campaigning. That's what happens after an election. Right now, it's about 1:30, 1:45 in the morning. We're still seeing what is happening. Obviously, some of my colleagues are managing to hold on, which is fantastic. Some of them aren't winning, and I'm really hoping we're going to get a positive result here tonight in Chingford. That's the one result we're waiting for now here. Look, we have to see how the pieces lie first, but I don't think any of us can pretend this is what we were hoping for and what we've been fighting for. And obviously, we owe it to the British public to ask ourselves why we didn't win.
You mentioned Chingford there, waiting to see if Ian Duncan-Smith might be removed by a Remain vote, and that's what I referred to I suppose, in my first question to you, this tale of two elections at least. Sure. Is Labour now becoming a metropolitan party? You can only win in Remainy seats like yours.
Look, let's see how the results go. From what I understand, we've just held on in Hartlepool, which I think you would argue is a very different type of seat. We have to see what the results are. I've only seen a handful come in so far. Obviously, I've been here at the count and also looking after this one. But I do accept the challenge that we need to be a party that can win support across this country in order to win a government. I don't think that's an unfair question. I just don't know at this point in time what the test is that we've met.
OK, thank you very much indeed. We are hearing from the leader, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you very much for coming. Lovely to see you. Mr. Corbyn. Come and join the monster raving loonies. Amateurs, come early. Amateurs, come early.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn arriving at his count there in Islington in North London. We'll see how he's done when they declare there. A round of applause from the party activists. Some shouts there from some of the journalists in there about asking him if he was going to resign. No answer specifically on that issue from Jeremy Corbyn. And as I say, some cheering, not too much of it from the party activists. And I want to talk now to Labour's Jess Phillips, the Labour candidate, one of the Labour candidates in Birmingham. And Jess Phillips, let's stay because we're looking at pictures of your leader.
Hello.
Would you be cheering him? Would you be clapping him if you were there this evening?
I might act with courtesy, so yes, maybe. I don't think that there's nothing to gloat about, is there? But I don't think that there's much for the Labour Party to feel particularly good about and to be clapping and cheering. But you know what these things are like. It's for the cameras, isn't it?
Well, out of courtesy, I mean, do you think that, OK, after a period of reflection and examination, you need a new leader?
I mean, it would be impossible to say anything other than that, but as I've said on everybody who's put a camera in front of my face, I'm not going to stand here and scalp Jeremy Corbyn. The country, once all the results are in, it appears it is making quite a clear statement about how it feels about the Labour Party, the Labour Party's offer, the Labour Party for quite some time, and you know, I'm not going to be the person who writes your headlines, because actually I think that there are other people. I'm just a mere backbencher. There are other people who probably aren't letting you put cameras in front of their faces, who probably should be talking about what they think has gone wrong. And I'm not going to write your headlines for you tonight.
OK. No, indeed.
Well,
we don't.
Something has got to change.
You're right. We don't know what the headlines are fully going to be yet, but the results are coming in line with what the exit poll is telling us, and many people like you, prominent figures in the Labour Party, are saying, yeah, well, it's not going to be a good evening, to say the least. So just let me ask you.
Well, it's terrible.
Well, there we are. A bit of a headline in itself, one might say, Jess Phillips. But this issue of where Labour can win, it's the cities now. You're looking like you could become almost an extinct species in the towns and major parts of the kind of post-industrial northeast, northwest Wales. The list goes on.
It won't become extinct if we properly go out and listen to what is going wrong and properly act on it and actually try and do something. It's funny because Jeremy Corbyn has always been seen as being a radical, something radically different. But the reality is the Labour Party needs to radically change, because I don't believe it's extinct in towns or in places where I am absolutely certain, as somebody who represents a Leave seat that has suffered terribly from austerity, that the Conservative Party will be found incredibly wanting. And so I don't think that the Labour Party is extinct, and I think it has every chance to rebuild itself. But that notwithstanding, tonight is terrible. It's horrendous, it's heartbreaking, it's painful. It's painful for the people that I need to serve. It's painful for all of my constituents who are facing real challenges because of decisions made by the people who have governed us for nearly a decade. I remember when things used to get better, and now people have just got used to things getting worse.
OK.
And that is a tragedy that tonight the Labour Party wasn't able to rescue them from that.
OK, Jess Phillips, thanks very much indeed for spending the time to talk to us. So we want to go live now to this count of the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, there in North London. My colleague Sophie Ridge is there. And Sophie, we saw this ripple of applause as he arrived. Looks fairly muted. Tell us about it.
I think it does feel quite muted here. I mean, this really is, Jeremy Corbyn's stomping ground. He's held this seat since 1983. He's certainly not under pressure here if the number of red papers being counted up or anything to go by. But certainly when he came in, although he was greeted by supporters, by colleagues, there was a ripple of applause, it does feel muted. And that is clearly because of the exit poll and the results coming in so far. He may not be under pressure here in Islington North, but he is certainly under pressure nationally, and I think there will be questions asked of his leadership as the night unfolds, because 71 seats losses that the exit poll is predicting, their worst result for many decades. We've seen some of these results coming out soon. One of the results that we're expecting to hear right now is in Stockton South. Again, this is the kind of Leave voting area where Labour has been under pressure, so we can have a quick listen to try and find out what's happening there. Could it be more pressure on Jeremy Corbyn?
The number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Devlin, Brendan Michael William, Liberal Democrat, 2,338. Prescott, John...
OK, we need to leave that go to Chingford. Ian Duncan-Smith, a target for the Remainers.
144. Pfizer Shaheen, Labour Party, 22,219. Thank you. Therefore, I give public notice that Ian Duncan-Smith is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for Chingford and Woodford Green constituency.
Ian Duncan-Smith back there, one of the top targets there for Labour and the Remain inclined vote. Former leader of the Conservative Party, of course, leading Leaver, Brexiteer, member of the European Research Group. Well, he's back. And what did I see him breathing almost a sigh of relief there? We'll get you the numbers specifically on that constituency very soon, but just there at the bottom of your screen. Well, Conservatives have reached 50 seats of this predicted total of 368. A bit of a swing there to Labour, and the Lib Dem vote, though, look at that, just about splitting it enough to let Ian Duncan-Smith in. It was a close-run thing. Let's listen in to Mr. Duncan-Smith.
Can I thank, I hope on everyone's behalf, Mr. Mayor, the returning officers, all those who have worked incredibly hard here, both at the polling stations and also here doing the count tonight. Can I thank all of them, the police and all the security staff and everybody else. I wonder if we could give them a round of applause. They've done incredibly well. I'd personally like to thank my wife, Betsy, who's been with me through thick and thin through all these years. And also the incredible team, my team, who have worked unbelievably hard to get the results. So my thanks go to all of you, heartfelt thanks for the hard work that you've all put in. And can I most of all thank, after 27 years, my constituency, Chingford and Woodford Green. I think they are fantastic, and I dedicate the next 5 years to serving them in my best capacity that I possibly can, no matter what they voted, no matter what their views are. I'm pleased, therefore, incredibly grateful to them that they have returned me once more to represent this constituency. And I'm also incredibly pleased that it looks like that I shall be doing so starting from Monday in a Conservative majority government. Thank you very much indeed.
In Duncan Smith back in narrow squeak in Chingford. Let's go to a Labour gain from last time round. Back to see.
December 2019, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Kim Caddy, the Conservative Party candidate, 21,622. Lois Elaine Davis, Green Party, 1,529. Marsha Chantal de Cordova, Labour Party, 27,200.
Well, you can hear it for yourself. Raucous cheering there by the relieved Labour supporters. Marsha de Cordova, who took the seat in 2017. An increased majority there in heavily Remain voting seats there returned. We haven't got the numbers for you, but there we are. They are back, and they've also reached 50 seats. I've also got to alert you to another of the big turnouts, big turn-ups from 2017. Canterbury, you may remember when that was declared that Labour had gained that with a very slim majority of 187. We are hearing that Rosie Duffield, yes, John Bercow, Rosie Duffield has got back in there. The exit poll suggesting that the Tories might regain Canterbury. Well, they haven't. Again, and look at the turnout, 75%. Again, a Remain-leaning seat, Rosie Duffield there. 29,000 over the Conservatives, 27,000. Rosie Duffield elected with an increased majority. I said it was only 187. Well, she's multiplied that by more or less exactly 10, 1,836. Let's go back to Sophie Ridge and get her assessment. Now, what we're seeing here, Sophie, is what I was putting in part to Jess Phillips. Labour, where they are doing well, tend to be these cities with Remain-leaning seats and in the southeast, and these vast swathes, it looks like, of their former heartlands under real threat.
It really does feel, Dermot, like we're seeing a realignment, and that is certainly what people in Labour are saying as well. Labour candidates at the election saying that they think there's different stories going on in London and in the rest of the country. Talking to people in close to Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader as well, they're saying to us, sorry, we're just hearing some overhead speakers from the declarations here. We're not expecting them quite yet, though. People close to Jeremy Corbyn also saying that just look at the areas where we're losing. That goes to the heart of the problem. And I think it is Brexit, but it also perhaps goes a bit further about identity as well. Do they feel that the Labour Party really represents the identity that they feel politically, as opposed to being perhaps a bit too much of the kind of liberal metropolitan party that some feel it's becoming. Certainly you're seeing that in some of the seats. Labour taking gains in places like Putney, but losing some of those really long-standing seats that they've held for a long time: Blythe Valley, Workington, Blackwall South, Darlington. We can bring in my colleague Jason Farrell now, who's been following Jeremy Corbyn. You're just looking at pictures there of him arriving at the count just a short time ago, about 10 minutes ago, wasn't it, Jason? Yeah. You were there. What did he look like?
Well, I just got him getting out of the car, actually, so when he was still outside, and he was quite in a hurry to get in. I asked him, his reaction to the result. He just thanked me for the question, but didn't answer. Asked him if he was going to stand down. He was quite determined to get to the door. I asked him a few times. He didn't answer. Earlier, when I spoke to someone from his camp who was with him at the time of him seeing the exit results, he was apparently in shock. That person said he needed a bit of time to just absorb the result. But I think as his colleagues absorb it, especially those more in the centre of the party, they're reacting and blaming him. And he must be seeing that. He must be seeing some of his own MPs really turning on him now, especially those who tried to oust him back in 2016, saying a sense of, I told you so. Also, a lot of people, MPs I've spoken to in the north, saying that he's created a cabinet that was too London-centric, and saying, you know, don't just blame this on Brexit.
It's about more than that.
It's about more than that, yeah.
OK, thank you, Jason, very much for that analysis. Well, as Jason was just saying, pressure really growing on Jeremy Corbyn. Many feel that he should be considering his position if that exit poll is right, if the losses that they've seen so far continue throughout the night. Projected to lose 71 seats compared to in 2017. So certainly pressure growing on the Labour leadership now. Back to you for now.
OK, yeah. Sophie, back with you soon. Just want to talk to John Bercow about some of those results we've just seen. First of all, the Labour holding and increasing their majority in Canterbury, holding on, we're seeing there as well in Norwich South. Again, what Sophie was saying, really, these remain seats. Labour holding on there, but not in a lot of other places.
No, Sophie Ridge, of course, is absolutely right about that, Dermot. But I think there's just one other point to add in relation to Rosie Duffield boosting her majority in Canterbury and Clive Lewis being returned in Norwich South, and that is that it's not just a matter of Remain per se. It is that those two particular constituencies are, of course, university constituencies, a very significant student vote there. As far as Battersea is concerned, which happens to be my home seat, Marsha de Cordova has strengthened her position there, and that doesn't really come as a surprise. The demographic is just markedly different from that in so many other places.
Let's just reflect on and your overall thoughts as well, Beth Rigby, our political editor there. In Chingford, Ian Duncan-Smith getting back in, a feature there of the, I called it the Remain vote, let's call it the referendum vote. But Labour and the Lib Dems, well, if one of them hadn't stood, they had enough to take out Ian Duncan-Smith, and this was meant to be one of the top tactical voting
I can tell you they were very, very worried about that. Yeah. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, was in that constituency leafleting with Ian Duncan-Smith. He has worked his socks off and he's only just hung on. But
keep talking, but I'm going to throw this in there. Conservatives have gained Scunthorpe. We don't have the numbers yet, but they just keep coming in.
I mean, look, this is really a seismic election here. We've become used to, certainly in my sort of lifetime of covering politics, narrow majorities, coalition governments, hung parliaments and party systems where there's give and take and compromise. This sort of majority is going to give Boris Johnson the kind of power, executive power, to really potentially reshape our country, to have a very different type of politics for the next 5 years. I can't overstate what a big change this is going to be for the country. And secondly, and the Scunthorpe result reflects it, the bases of the parties are changing. London is becoming metropolitan, university-educated, liberal, if you like. The Tories are taking traditional Labour, working-class, heartland areas, and that is going to have an effect too on how Boris Johnson has to run his government, because he's going to have a different bunch of voters now supporting.
It's an interesting point, Beth.
Just very quickly, John, because no, please make your point.
Sure. No, what we've got here is identity politics trumping old-fashioned socio-economic determination of how people vote. People used to vote on a straightforward economic basis, and maybe people are now voting on a different basis. And the question is, will that be sustained? I've been in the House of Commons 22 years, and there's not been a Conservative Member of Parliament for Scunthorpe until now.
Yeah.
Lots of implications for both the major parties there. Another gain. Look, they just keep coming, as I say, Redcar, 15-point swing or so, again for the Conservatives, 15-point swing or so away from the Labour Party. There's the numbers for you, what reading that makes for Jeremy Corbyn and all the leadership of the Labour Party. Jacob Young in there at 18,811, and look at that change in share. Look, it's just the way that the Labour vote has been whacked down. 18% fall there. Brexit Party doing fairly well. The Brexit Party standing in these former Labour seats now. Redcar again, another gain. Listen, the Conservatives also doing well in Wales. We've seen held on in Vale of Glamorgan, took Wrexham, took Clwyd South, and Dan Whitehead is there to talk about the picture in Wales. Dan.
Yeah, Dermot, what a fascinating evening we are having here in Wales. Vale of Glamorgan, Alan Cairns, the Conservative MP, holding on to his seat here despite controversies. He had to stand down, of course, as the Welsh Secretary at the start of November, but he held down this seat here, doubled his majority, in fact, to 4,000 votes. But we are seeing some significant Tory gains in Wales, and to discuss those, we are joined by the Head of Politics from Cardiff University, Roger Allen Scully. Thank you for joining us, Roger. I mean, let's start with Wrexham, for instance. What have we seen up there tonight?
Well, the Conservatives, not had this seat for a very, very long time. They did not win it at all in the entire 20th century, yet they won the seat quite clearly tonight. And that was very significant, actually, that result, because it's the first ever time that the Welsh Conservatives have elected a female MP.
Significant polling earlier this week. It looks like that the Tory gains that you had predicted are going that way. What else have we seen, especially in North Wales?
Well, we're seeing, Labour potentially, Labour have been the dominant party in Wales for almost a century, yet they could come very close to, if not actually being wiped out in North Wales, losing all of their seats there. We're seeing also significant losses in terms of Labour vote share in some seats in South Wales, maybe one or two further seats going to the Conservatives. And it seems as if the Welsh Conservatives could equal Margaret Thatcher's record from 1983 of 14 Welsh Conservative MPs, the best they've done in any election since the war.
And that's the record. Anything above 14 for the Tories in Wales is going to be a record.
Yeah, absolutely. This would be genuinely historic. And seeing the results here, seeing the results in other parts of Wales, it's far from inconceivable when this night is done that they could actually do that.
What's going on here, Roger? Is this Brexit? Is it Jeremy Corbyn? Is it both?
We're seeing, I think, in many parts of Wales, as we've seen in much of England as well, in those sort of smaller towns and some of those traditional Labour areas that voted for Brexit, people are deserting the Labour Party in significant numbers, going straight over to the Conservatives, the ultimate Labour nightmare. We're also seeing, though, I think, the Jeremy Corbyn leadership did not work in Wales, Labour's traditional bastion, any more than it's worked in many of Labour's other traditional areas of strength.
We're just going to cross to Anglesey, I think. I believe we're getting the declaration there now.
OK, well, thanks, Dan. And talking about Wales there and the threat to Labour's dominance there over so many decades and indeed centuries. But we were looking at the picture in Inishmore, and this, of course, is a Labour seat that on current performance is under threat. So we're not able to bring you that declaration, bring you the numbers yet. But what I do want to tell you about is that the SNP have made a gain. It's not all great news for the Conservatives, and certainly not in Scotland. The SNP have taken Ochil and South Perthshire. John Nicholson is back there. John Nicholson, yes, excuse me. John Nicholson is back there after a short period out after losing the seat in 2017. John Burke?
No. Previously, the Member of Parliament of that constituency was the indefatigable Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh.
He lost his seat.
We mustn't airbrush Tasmina. Nobody could airbrush Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh out of history. She had a very distinguished record, but she lost her seat. Now, John Nicholson was a member elsewhere, and now he's got back in this constituency. That's obviously very good news for the SNP.
But the overall point being, Beth Rigby, that, yes, overall, a great picture it looks like for the Conservatives, but not in Scotland and, not in parts of the Romani South and the Romani capital and some of the cities.
So, and if one theme of the election, it seems to be, will be this return to big majority government, if this plays out as it looks. I mean, that's going to be fascinating in terms of how our politics works. But in terms of the Conservative Party, if they have losses in Scotland, if the SNP really build their base, that will just strengthen Nicola Sturgeon's hand in calling for a second independence referendum. You put into the mix Brexit, which Scotland voted against, and what you can see is a strong Boris Johnson in Westminster and in Parliament.
Beth, West Bromwich West. Can Labour hold on here? Majority of 4,400 from the last election.
Candidate at the said election is as follows. Bailey Sean Stephen, the Conservative Party candidate, 17,000, I beg your pardon, 17,419 and is elected. Clucas Helen Flora, commonly known as Clucas Flo, Liberal Democrats to stop Brexit, 915. Cunningham James Thomas, Labour Party, 13,620. Dalerio Francesco, commonly known as Dalerio
two gains in quick succession for the Conservatives. Once again, West Bromwich West there that we're looking at, Inishmore that we briefly focused on their Anglesey in Wales. A gain there from the Labour Party. Looking at West Bromwich West, as I say, there was a majority there for the Labour Party of 4,400. It was a seat that voted 68.7% to leave the European Union. The Brexit Party standing there, not doing too well. And this Conservative gain from Labour, they've turned that 4,000-odd majority for Labour into a majority for the Conservatives of 3,700 or so, taking just over 50% of the votes. And the Labour Party hooked below 40%. And change in share, up 10%, nearly 11%, the Conservatives. The Labour vote down 12.5%. Brexit Party, 5.3%. Bishop Auckland, very slim majority from the past election for Labour.
Declaration of results of poll, Durham County, election of a Member of Parliament for Bishop Auckland, held on Thursday, the 12th of December, 2019. I, Terry Collins, being the acting returning officer at the election, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Brown, Nicholas Allen, Brexit Party, 2,500. Fairham, De Henna, Sheridan, the Conservative and Unionist Party, 24,067. Georgeson, Raymond Lawrence, Liberal Democrat, 2,133. Goodman, Helen Catherine, Labour Party, 16,105. There were 131...
There we are again there, another gain for the Conservative Party in Bishop Auckland. Not too high a mountain for them to climb, given that they were only facing a 502-vote majority there for Helen Goodman, who took it at the last election. But look at the size of that majority. Look what they've turned it into, nearly 8,000 majority in Bishop Auckland. Another heavily leave voting seats, and they've taken over 50% of the vote in Bishop Auckland. Labour pushed down to 36% again. Labour down double digits, 12.1%. The Conservatives up 6.8%, and also the Brexit Party up 5.6%. Worth talking then now, going to Stoke and talking to Labour's Ruth Smeeth. First of all, your exit poll is the exit poll is suggesting that you're going to be in a bit of trouble, Ruth Smeeth. I mean, do you see it that way? It seems it could be.
Oh no, I've definitely lost.
Well, very frank of you. Thank you very much indeed for confirming that. That makes it then a grim night personally, and a really grim night for the party.
This is, never mind the party, this is an appalling night for my constituents, and it's an appalling night for the country. And the Labour Party has huge, huge questions to answer by, first of all, having this general election when they were so ill-prepared for it, but then having this option available to the country, having this platform, having this leadership, and allowing this devastation that hit all of our communities. This is an appalling, heartbreaking night for the Labour Party, but I'm much, much more worried about now what happens to my constituents. Indeed.
Well, you say more or less that the Labour Party's let them down. Where does the finger point first of all?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Has he got to go?
Jeremy Corbyn should announce that he's resigning as leader of the Labour Party from his count today.
I think he should have gone a while back.
He should have gone, and he should have gone many, many, many months ago. I was the parliamentary chair of the Jewish Labour movement. We passed a vote of no confidence in him in April. There is absolutely no justification for why he's still there, and his personal actions have delivered this
result for my constituents and for swathes of the country overnight.
Well, you're more or less saying the guilty man. What about this issue of dealing with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? I mean, do you see, there was so much talk about it, but we never really seemed to see any evidence of solid disciplinary action being taken.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very clear that when someone says I haven't got human blood and they're not even suspended from the Labour Party, when someone says vile misogynistic things about people like me and others, words that I wouldn't use on Sky TV, and they are not expelled from the Labour Party, suggests that we have a problem. And I don't care what Jeremy Corbyn and Jenny Formby have said about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and how they've dealt with it. They simply have not.
And in terms of anti-Semitism, that was, you know, the internal party processes. How did that play from your perspective in this general election? Was it raised with you as an example of one of the faults of the leadership?
Jeremy Corbyn's actions on anti-Semitism have made us the nasty party. We are the racist party. And when you've got a leader, a prime minister, that has said such vile Islamophobic comments, and we're the racist party because of the actions of my leader, the lack of actions of it, and who he's associated with and his friends are, then we have a real problem. The Labour Party now needs detoxified. We need to move on, and we need to make sure that this culture is destroyed within the Labour Party, that racism has no place, that there is no hierarchy of racism, and that everybody makes it clear that Jews have a safe space in the Labour Party, because quite frankly, they don't at the moment.
You've got the recipe there. Do you see any prospect of it actually happening, given who's in control of the party apparatus? I'm sorry, Ruth Smith. Hopefully we would be able to continue that, but they're declaring it's cities of London and Westminster. Now, this one of the hopes for Chuka Umunna, formerly of the Labour Party, now with the Lib Dems.
17,049. McLachlan, Gillian Mary McLachlan, commonly known as Jill McLachlan, Christian People's Alliance, 125. Nardell Gordon Lawrence, Labour Party, 11,624. Polanski, Zach, Green Party, 728. Umunna, Chuka Harrison, Liberal Democrats, 13,096.
OK, well, there we are. Look at that. 13,000 for Chuka Umunna and the Lib Dems, and the Labour Party taking over 11,000. Would easily have outstripped Nikki Aiken, who've taken it, who've held it for the Conservative Party. So much for tactical voting. All these websites and apps we were told about, that people were going to get their act together and take these kind of seats. And on that very note, want to go over to Chingford and talk to the former leader of the Conservative Party, Ian Duncan-Smith. There you are, Mr. Duncan-Smith, returned there in Chingford. I don't know if you can hear me, Mr. Duncan-Smith. Hello? Sky News. Sorry to be...
Hello. Pay attention, Ian.
Sorry to be... You may have heard John Bercow there, a familiar voice to you. On this issue...
Hello, John. Hi.
On this issue of the tactical voting and this Remain Alliance, or whatever it wanted to call itself, they came pretty close to getting rid of you.
Well, I think that there was definitely some tactical voting in this seat, and I think the biggest problem is that we haven't settled Brexit. So now I hope and believe that with Boris Johnson getting what looks like an overall majority, I hope a good substantial one, then we have a chance now to bring this whole thing to an end, get Brexit done, get that trade deal that we talked about, finish it all off. The only way I think we'll bring society together again over this issue and stop this being an issue at every election and even in people's private life is to do that, to get Brexit done. And that's where Boris Johnson is the only one that made that promise. Otherwise, if it had been anybody else, we'd be meandering along for another 6 months to a year with no decisive results. So getting that majority was critical, and I do believe Boris Johnson is a one-nation Prime Minister, and I don't think he's going to spend his time doing anything else
He's going to do Brexit. He's going to do
well,
health.
let's just concentrate.
More police on the streets.
Sorry, Mr. Duncan-Smith. I'm going to try and be snappy because a lot of results, as you know, coming in. But just on the issue of Brexit, which you've been so concerned about for so long, particularly under the previous leader. I mean, you've called it "Get Brexit Done." We all know it's only the withdrawal agreement. Do you think then that it all can be done and dusted, the trade association and all that hangs off that, by the end of 2020?
I think it is wholly feasible because a lot of this work has already been scoped by the Civil Service and the Foreign Office behind the scenes. The Brexit department have already been scoping out what the arrangements are. They've been discussing those with the EU. It's not as though it's going to start from scratch in January. The reality is it is feasible to do that. They want a deal. I think this majority that we're going to get now, it looks like, with the Conservative Party, does also do something for that negotiation. It tells the European Union you're now dealing with a government that can get things through, which means now settlement is almost instantaneous. It'll come back to Parliament and we'll be able to get these things through because we have a majority. So that relationship changes between the two of them.
But I mean, Mr. Duncan-Smith, he can get things through. I'm sorry, got to cut it off. We're going to Belfast North because Nigel Dodds, the Westminster leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, standing there. Will he hold on?
135, 21135. Finucane, John, Sinn Féin, 23,078.
One might say the biggest scalp of the evening so far. Nigel Dodds, the leader at Westminster of the Democratic Unionist Party, lost his seat to John Finucane there of Sinn Féin, the Lord Mayor of Belfast. John Finucane, son of Pat Finucane, who was killed 30 years or so ago in a terrorist shooting. But he's taken the seat, 23,078. You may notice there, very few standing there. The SDLP stood down, a form of Remain alliance that was turned by Sinn Féin. They've taken the seat from Nigel Dodds, has gone in Belfast North. John Bercow.
Well, that is the biggest scalp of the night. Nigel Dodds is a long-serving Member of Parliament. He has a very high profile. But with that high profile has come controversy. And if you are a big figure, you're a big target. And Nigel Dodds was a big target. And that's reflected not just in the identity of his Sinn Féin opponent, but in the fact that other candidates withdrew in order to give Sinn Féin the best possible chance. And what that really is about is very, very, very strong hostility, I think, to the DUP's position on Brexit.
Beth.
And just to pick up, I mean, I was watching that because we thought that Nigel Dodds might lose that seat, but we've talked a lot about Scotland and the issue of Brexit and how that affects Scotland, but of course Northern Ireland, and how will Boris Johnson's Brexit deal affect Northern Ireland, and will in the long term that also lead to a suggestion of perhaps a border poll in Northern Ireland as well? You know, that is another constitutional issue that comes out of this election. So one big constitutional crisis resolved and other ones bubble up.
Beth, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one can't help but think that if forced to choose between the Union and Brexit, the DUP would go for the Union. But for the time being, they have strongly supported Brexit, and I think that they are...
One of the beginning to regret that. Let's just throw in there the Conservatives have gained Eastbourne from the Liberal Democrats, so it's not all bleak for them in the South East as well. Beth, continue.
I was just going to ask you, John, do you think in retrospect the DUP would have been smart to have backed Theresa May in her withdrawal agreement bill? Because they didn't back her and it didn't go through, but actually...
Well, in terms of that ambition to be for the whole of the UK to be treated the same, I'm going to cut you off there because we are approaching the top of the hour. It's just about to turn 3 o'clock, therefore an appropriate moment to remind you that you are watching this Brexit election special coverage right here through the night on Sky News as it turns 3 o'clock. Let me take you through the headlines so far.